Good evening. It is Monday, August 10th. It's currently 6:03 p.m. We're going to open the Board of Selectmen's meeting for this evening. At this point, I'll entertain a motion, if the board so chooses, to waive the reading of the announcement of open meeting recordings as printed in the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. We'll have a roll call vote, please.
Clock eye.
Nichols eye.
Whiteman, aye.
Resity, aye. That is, motion carries.
Jeff's on.
Jeff, are you, I apologize, Jeff. I thought you might be late. Are you on? I see his icon there. So the motion carries. We will have 4 yeas and one, I'm sorry, present. Present. All right.
Mitch,
Jeff,
I apologize for interrupting. Is it possible for the folks that are in the room to just say who's making the motion, just because sometimes I have a hard time telling who it is?
Understood. So if everyone here could just repeat their last name in the motion. Thank you, Tamika.
Also, if I can suggest when you do a roll call, if you just call our names and we'll answer so that we can all answer at the same time.
Oh, what if I forget your name? All right, that's fine. I'll do that too. Tamika, that would make your life easier, I'm sure. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have minutes, Treasury, Warrant, and Payroll, and to approve those.
Do you want to do it in a block or do you want to do it individual?
I'll take either a slate or individually.
Let's do it as a slate.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if I may, I think the June 27th minutes need to be approved separately because that was the old board also. I'm not 100% sure. I need to look at those minutes.
All right, there's also an executive session, I believe, in there too, and those minutes obviously would have to be approved in executive session. So why don't we go ahead then, Skip, if you want to rescind your motion.
I rescind my motion.
We can just, we can put off the minutes until we have a chance to verify that and entertain a motion for the other items.
Motion to approve Treasury Warrant 3 and approval of payroll.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Clark. Do we have a second?
Second.
Whiteman seconds. Oh.
All right, we have a second by Lyndon. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Whiteman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Stillings, aye, if you copy me.
Okay. A Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Moving on, we have public comment. Do we have anyone in the audience, which is vast seemingly, on Zoom, that is here for public comment, noting that I know some of you are probably here for an item that's on the agenda. If we could perhaps hold off on that until that item comes up, that would be appreciated, but I'll leave it to the discretion of those in the public. Hold on, folks. We're having a technical. Chair recognizes Mr. Sullivan. I think you unmuted yourself and had your hand up.
I did.
ahead.
First of all, I want to make sure am I or am I not on the agenda? I don't want to go against what you just requested.
You're in public comment, sir. The item on the agenda that I was referring to was the 61A petition.
Okay, fine. So the purpose of my interest is to discuss with you, as I mentioned to you at our RDIC meeting last Wednesday, the makeup of our board. Your committee decided at their last meeting to change the number of board members. And I should point out to you that we went through this with the previous board in 2018 and had a great deal of discussion and debate, and it was agreed that it would be best to stay at 5. I'm not sure why this happened or what precipitated it. But, you know, I should probably preface this whole thing by saying, you know, one of the things that I think is critical in town government is open communication and transparency. And I don't understand why, if your board opted to change the makeup of our board, why we weren't made aware of it and why we weren't included in those discussions so that we could share our thoughts. That's point number one. But point number two, and most importantly, is that you have now made our board a 6-member board, which is an even number, obviously, and that is not conducive to good government policy when it comes to, you know, voting. In fact, Mr. Mike Nicholson at your last meeting pointed out that it is best practice to have an odd number. So I guess I'd be curious to know from somebody why that happened and what the intent was there, and then I'll go on.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan, thank you for your comments. I guess to address your first point, the Board of Selectmen is charged with making the appointments to RDIC. Obviously, I think RDIC has a master plan. It is tasked with a very specific task, and we feel, I think the board, speaking on the board's behalf, on that decision, felt that maybe it was best to change direction in the hope that something would come fruition over that property. Just as an update for folks kind of listening and tuning in, we currently have a debt on that property that the residential taxpayers are supporting for about $365,000. Interest payments on that are about $10,000 a year. The short-term debt extensions for that parcel are almost up, meaning that we're going to have to go into a long-term debt situation, which is directly passed on to residential taxpayers. So I think that you know, it's important that we recognize that the RDIC has a mission for that property. They have a master plan outlining projects for that property. And it's been almost 2 decades without any fruition or perception of any fruition of those projects coming to light. I guess to the second point there, Mike, in terms of a 6-person board, you know, we had some interest for the vacancies that were presented by Ms. Greenwood, as well as Doug Briggs, who was on that board. And we felt like more qualified people on that board, you know, the better. We had some interesting names come in. It's my understanding that MGL allows the Board of Selectmen to make that board sized between 5 and 15 individuals. And to directly address your concern about an even number board, I think Leah had brought up the point in the last meeting that if we received an applicant or interest from someone moving forward, we could definitely consider that person. You also have some seats opening up in the spring for reappointment as well, which the board could take action on. If there is a tie vote between an even numbered board, the tie results in a motion failure. Obviously, if the yays outfavor the nays, the motion carries. So I think that for right now, in the guidance we're receiving, or at least I'm receiving, the concern is a little bit unfounded in terms of the even number. I know it's an odd position to be in, but it's something that the board felt comfortable with when making those appointments.
Well, I'm not sure that I agree with you that the board felt comfortable, because I heard at least 2 members question the even number. And at the end of that discussion, you, the chair, specifically said that you could add a 7th member, and I'm going to paraphrase now. We can certainly add another member if A, we have an interested party, B, someone applies, and you then said you hope that the board would appoint any qualified applicant. So here's my concern. We have a procedure that has not been followed in regards to appointment of new members.
What procedure is that, Mr. Sullivan?
Excuse me?
What procedure is that?
Well, it's, if you want to know, it's the Town of Rutland Board and Committee Appointments, Policy and Procedures. And I'll read it to you, sections of it. I won't bore you with the whole thing, but it was adopted or amended in 2018. This policy and procedure is adopted to provide uniform, transparent procedure for inviting applicants for membership on board of selected committees, appointed town boards and committees for consistency in the appointment process, whether pursuant to established appointment schedules or to fill vacancies. Then under policy, the board shall take into consideration any and all of the following criteria prior to appointing new members, filling vacancies, and reappointing existing members to boards and committees. And there's 3 bullets. Written recommendation from the relevant board or committee. We never supplied any written recommendation.
Mr. Sullivan, if I can just stop you right there before you continue. I'm familiar with the policies and procedures. This issue was discussed at length during appointments last year during CONCOM, and it was determined that those procedures were recommendations. I'll also remind you that the reappointments and the reappointment list has been on our agenda as a board since at least April. It doesn't appear that RDIC has met since at least March, so I can certainly understand the concerns there. But again, the board acted in the interest of
sorry, can't hear you.
Laid out in the master plan with that property, sir.
I'm sorry,
Mitch?
I couldn't hear that. Could you repeat that?
What part did you not hear?
Your last paragraph.
About the the board and commission's policies?
Yes.
Again, we went over that as a board at length last year during the reappointment process. It was determined that in the creation of those, there were recommendations and guidelines. Now, it's concerning because MGL dictates that policy be between, or I'm sorry, that board be between 5 and 15 members. At the time that we made those reappointments, and again, reminding you that the reappointment list has been on the select board's agenda since April of this year, that we have items we have to move on, and the board did not legally meet the requirement of being at 5 members because of a resignation and then because of a vacancy. Now, this was not just your board. This was boards across town-wide. These issues were not addressed when in reality they probably should have been in the spring. So we had to move on those to put the town in the best position to move forward on some of the policies that come in front of the board.
Okay.
I do want to bring up, Mike, I know that you had sent a communication earlier today, which you included communications from several of your board and committee members, including yourself, Ms. Van Riet, and Mr. Williams. Now, I want to remind you, I don't believe this was on your last board agenda, and I don't believe the other members of your board were privy to that discussion, and you're coming awfully close to an open meeting law violation by communicating those things in writing to us as a town and amongst yourselves as a board.
Well, Mr. Chairman, may I point out to you, it's my responsibility to worry about whether I am crossing the line of the open space bylaw.
It is absolutely not. It is the town's responsibility to monitor whether or not you are crossing the line in your duties. So else, the board has already voted on the reappointments. If there is nothing else, I'd like to move on in public comment with all due respect, sir.
No, I would like to have the opportunity to be heard. Now, I asked to come in front of your committee as a member of the RDIC, and you would not let me do that. You told me
it was explained to you why you could not come on the agenda as officially as a board. Now, if you'd like, I can have the town administrator explain to you again why that request was inappropriate.
No, I asked to come as an individual and speak to you as the chairman of the RDIC. And you told me I couldn't do that.
It was inappropriate for you to come in your official capacity for the reasons that were outlined to you in your meeting last week. Would you like those restated?
Yes, I would. But while you're searching for those,
I'm not searching.
Okay.
If I may, through the chair, if you can hear me.
I can hear whoever that is.
Go ahead, Sean.
If this helps, and they need another member to make it an odd, I would like to officially, if I may, at this time, say that I'm interested. I've attended RDIC meetings before. I do have 9 years of service with the town on several boards. I'd be more than happy to help out in any way I can. if I may, through Mr. Sullivan.
Understood. However, I would encourage anyone who would like to submit materials through the appropriate means, and we can consider that. Unfortunately, that is not an item on the agenda for this evening.
Yes,
so
I understand.
Okay,
I just
we're not
wanted to
gonna
come
take
into an
actions.
argument.
Understood. Thank you, and I certainly appreciate the interest. We're not going to take actions on items that are not on the agenda for this evening.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Duly noted.
you have a submission from Mr. Briggs. You have his background information. You have his letter of recommendation from the RDIC, and you have his letter of interest to serve on the board, as spelled out in the procedures.
Okay, so are you asking as a chairman of that board? Because in my mind, Mike, you've already consulted with your other members of the board that you presented in us via an email. This is something that you should really take back to your own board and have a vote. And if it's something that they want to move forward with, we'll consider anything that the RDIC wants to put forward. Again, I will restate the boards and commissions of this town, in particular RDIC, that are appointed serve at the will of the Board of the Selectmen. We voted on reappointments. There were motions that were made. There was not a motion to reappoint Mr. Briggs. There's going to be another vacancy or a reappointment up in the spring. I would certainly encourage him to reapply then. Again, I would encourage you, Mike, to bring it back to your board for a vote and a proper discussion and an agenda item versus bringing it directly to the Board of Selectmen in an unofficial capacity.
Okay, well then I would appreciate if your board follows the procedures that were supposed to be followed, such as after receiving a letter of resignation, you're supposed to post in the community hall bulletin board, the local access TV, within 30 days of the meeting.
It was posted, sir.
What's that?
It was posted. It was posted, discussed, and accepted back in April.
So vacancies were posted for 14 days prior to the Board of Selectmen making appointments to fill the vacancies?
Yes, sir.
So the board will, okay, so residents serving on an appointed board or committee shall submit a letter of interest with a brief description of their relevant experience. So those were submitted?
Yes, sir.
And with their qualifications?
Yes, sir.
Can we see those?
I'd be more than happy to forward anything that you'd like onto you.
Can we put them on the screen?
Mitch, if I may, can I just request that we as a board have access to those? Because this last appointment, I realized after everything was moving quickly and we didn't have access to any of the letters of interest or anything. We just had verbal from, I think, you and Skip that...
Leah, just to correct you on that, all the letters of interest were dropped into the Google Drive prior to the meeting and an email was sent out with that material.
I didn't see them and I looked in the Google Drive. I'll look again.
Okay, last 2 points I want to make. The Board of Selectmen must receive the board or committee's written recommendation on the appointment and the letter of interest from the resident prior to making the appointment. That was not done. A representative from the board or committee and its recommended new member must attend the board's meeting in which the appointment is made. That was not done. Mike, Mitch, I'm not here to argue with you. Like I started the conversation with, transparency, cooperation is imperative in a town of our size. But I see this board running roughshod over this policy and roughshod over the RDIC at this point.
Sir, again, I want to reiterate that those policies are advisory in nature. This was adjudicated last year. The reappointments have been on the agenda for months. I'm not sure how else we'd like that to communicate. The resignation was communicated, the materials were shared, and the board took a vote. And again, our responsibility to the taxpayers of this community is to ensure that we follow the master plans of that property. There is a hefty debt tag that the residential taxpayers are picking up on the behalf of that board. No, Mike, I don't think you do. Because
Mr.
the board...
Chairman, I beg your pardon. Who are you to tell me I don't understand the debt? I've known about that debt a heck of a lot longer than you have. So
and that's the problem, Mike. That is the problem.
What is the problem?
Is that it's been... We've had nothing developed on that property in terms of substantial revenue generation for the town and the taxpayers for quite some time. In fact, the property wasn't even advertised statewide until we got a new town administrator on board over the last year. The Deputy Undersecretary of Economic Development for the state came out for the first time to that property, despite the fact that the town has had control over it for almost 2 decades. So again, I understand your concerns. I respect your position, Mike. I encourage you to take this back to your board for a vote and a discussion, and we can have a discussion in an official capacity when that occurs. So thank you. In the meantime, I believe that we need to move on. We have other people here for public comment.
So then what you're basically telling me is you're ignoring your own written policy?
No, I'm not basically telling you anything, Mike. I just told you that we're going to move on.
No, but what I'm asking you is, why are you not following your own written procedures?
Mike, we just went over this. All right,
No, you
we're
didn't
going
answer
to
that
move on.
question.
Is there anyone else here for public discussion?
So Mr. Chairman, your ability to control the microphone basically is going to decide what the discussion is here.
No, the agenda decides the discussion, Mike. We're on the
Yes,
agenda.
And when you came to our meeting,
In fact, this isn't even, I'm having a discussion with you out of courtesy. This is a public comment period.
I agree. And when
Okay.
you came to our meeting on Wednesday, I specifically told you what I wanted to discuss at your meeting, and you said, yes, that would be fine.
And we're discussing it. We've discussed it. I see that we're going to keep going in cyclical patterns here. So again, I would encourage you to go through official channels in your own board. You do have a reorg that has to take place, which I know that you failed to do last meeting, outside of board policy. You've communicated to us communications from both you and other board members without other knowledge of the board, which is inappropriate to begin with. This
No,
really
I
has to
beg
be a
your
discussion,
pardon.
Mike, that you have with your own board.
You're
Before
telling
it
me
comes
that
to
I
us.
communicated without the knowledge of my own board. How do you know that?
Because you sent an email to the town this afternoon.
Yes,
With
and
letters-
how do you know the board members didn't know that?
Okay, it wasn't on the agenda. So either you're having a discussion outside of public meeting with your board, or you're just having a discussion with members who submitted comments as part of your email.
So those are emails that were submitted after Doug didn't get appointed. Had nothing to do with the meeting. They were personal emails that were sent.
Okay, so it has something to do with the RDIC, which makes it official business. So again, you have to go through the proper channels to address this, Mike.
All right,
I would
well, these-
encourage you to go back to your board and have this as an agenda item for your next meeting. I believe you're meeting soon. You can talk about it then, have a vote on what you want to do, and the Board of Selectmen will entertain any item that you bring. Otherwise, again, I'll ask you for a third time if we can move on. And we have a lot of other people here waiting for public comment and to discuss items. About 30 folks in this meeting. All right?
And I'm
out of
going
respect-
to ask you in the future.
54 individuals. Out of respect for those people's time, I would respect that you bring it back to your board and come back. We can put you on the agenda once the board votes on it, and we can have a formal discussion.
Okay, so I will be put on the agenda.
If the board votes in favor, sure.
Stillings through the chair.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Through the chair. First, my apologies for technical difficulties. I haven't made it home yet. Having problems with the unmute. Two prior votes that you just had, I do concur. If Tamika wanted to add Stillings' aye on both of those last two. But recognizing that this is just public comment in there, there were two topics that jumped out at me that I would like to perhaps see if there was something that could be agenda placed down the road. One of them was the Google drop, which I've just not technical savvy enough to understand the Google drop. So those heads up were lost on me in there. Maybe that's something I can work on. And the second one, though, is I think there is some merit to having an odd number on the boards, and I would at least ask for maybe we can do some future discussion on the merits of having 7 members of the RDIC.
Understood,
Again.
Jeff. Thank you.
So, thank you very much.
All right. Is there anyone else here available for public comment? We have 54 members of the public in here. We have Jamie Adams with the individual's hand up. You are recognized. Go ahead. Name and address, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Jamie Adams, 97 Prescott Street in Rutland, Mass. Thank you so much for opening up public comment here. Just this is my first board meeting, and forgive me, I've not reviewed the agenda, so perhaps this is there. But the reason for my attendance this evening is it was expressed to me there was a potential for for the town to revisit a sewage treatment on Prescott Street. I believe
Okay,
that
before you go ahead, Jamie, we have an item on the agenda for the 61A petition that you're referring to, and I'd like to hold all conversation until that time. Just before we have that discussion, I do want to clear up a couple points of contention that I know have been raised in the community. We have a process through 61A, which, as some of you know and some of you don't, is a protection on agricultural land here in town, which, to sum it up in kind of, I guess, common vernacular, I mean, farm properties have certain protections and tax incentives to remain within a certain use. And as part of that process, that legal process, if those properties were to be broken up or sold, the town has first right of refusal to acquire the properties at market value. If not, we release those properties and the owner can do what they wish on those. As part of that process, when a 61A application or petition is filed, in this case by Mr. Jarvie, the 61A petition is, by our own process and procedures, sent to various boards and commissions to see if there's any interest on behalf of the town in acquiring the property, again, through this process. Those boards and commissions include Planning Board and Concom. I know that it's been important to us, too, to always get our Ag Commission, their view on those petitions as they come in. We've handled a couple of these over the last couple of months. The Planning Board had a discussion based on potential future uses that would include the project you describe. Again, this is not something imminent. This is not something the Board of Selectmen or any other town board or department has had a conversation on in an official capacity related to this property, other than a study that was done more than a decade ago. Now, I understand there's a lot of people here to comment on that. That is not something that was brought to the board's attention. In terms of the process, we do have a legal process through 61A that we do have to follow, and the town has, I believe it's 120 days to follow that process to do our due diligence. I think the fears from other parcels that have gone through this in the past, particularly the Davis property, I believe off Main Street, which is now housing development, that's something that a lot of people don't take lightly. I know the planned use over there, we can get to it when we talk about the 61A, is for a subdivision as of right now if the property were to come out of 61A. So again, that's a conversation we're going to have later in the agenda. I would ask anyone that's here for that conversation to just wait until we get to that item. But I do want to clear up some of the miscommunications that I know have been going on social media. I also would be remiss to mention that if folks could please not nail signs or post signs to public trees and property. I know it's something that we had to dispatch staff earlier today to remove. That's something we really frown on, and it takes up staff time. So I appreciate that. Is there anyone here for public comment not related to the 61A process that we can go to? Nick, somebody has their hand up? Okay, so we'll get to that item shortly. I appreciate your all's patience. If we don't have anyone else.
Sorry, Mitch, this is not public comment, but I have a question. If you want to revisit the minutes, I think we could do both the ones that are listed, the June 27th as well as the July 27th, if you want. The June 27th was the before and after annual town meeting, and then the July 27th.
Leah, let's just wait till the end of the meeting. I've got a lot of people here, and then we'll just take care of it then. But I appreciate you looking into that. We have a hand up from somebody in the public. Robin Farrington, if you could just do name and address.
Hi, Robin Farrington, 21 Shoreline Drive. I had just hopped on, but I was wondering, Mr. Chairman, if you could please repeat everything that you just said in relation to the agenda item regarding the sewer treatment, the proposed sewer treatment plan. I overheard you say we weren't going to have any discussion during public comment about that agenda item, and then the next thing you know, you're going on and on and on about this particular agenda item. And so I'm guessing more people are going to be joining the meeting.
No, I'm sorry, Robin. I just wanted to clear up some of the back and forth that I think was erroneously.
Can you save that for the agenda item though? Because you said you wanted to hold off till that agenda item before any conversation about this topic took place.
Okay,
so,
understood, duly noted. We'll wait till the agenda item. I appreciate your comment. Is there anyone else that is here for public comment not related to 61A? Okay, thank you. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is going to be, we have petitions, applications, awards, and presentation. We received late today, this is a last minute addition, several one-day liquor licenses for Milk Room Brewing, one for August 14th, 15th, and 16th, and then 3 more for the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. I believe that I've received confirmation that all of the necessary application materials and fees have been paid. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion. Before I do, Mike, can we have clarity, or Nick, on the 6 one-day licenses that are currently in front of us? What does that bring our total to for the facility?
Mitch, this is Nick Monaco. The total for his facility will be, after this, will be 28.
Okay, great. And we have Mr. Jarvie has his hearing on his permanent license on the 24th.
Yes, he does.
Okay, great. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve those, or to move on those licenses.
I make a motion to approve on the license for August 14th.
We have a motion for all 6 by Selectman Nichols. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Clark seconded. We have a motion, a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote, please. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Webman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Stillings, aye.
Recity, aye. A motion carries, unanimous vote. Okay, we have next on the agenda the town administrator update. Is that correct? Mike, I'm looking at it. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the indentation is weird on the formatting. I apologize. So we have a follow-up. We have a petition from Mr. Jarvie, the town of Rutland, to waive their 61A right of first refusal on the sale of lots 1, 2, and 3 on Prescott Street. We've received letters so far from Conservation Commission, Board of Assessors, and AgCom, and a letter of interest from the Planning Board on that parcel. Mike?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point out that Mr. Jarvie is in this meeting listed as iPad 3. If there are any questions for the property.
Okay. All right. So at this time, I'm going to open it up to the 1,000 people in the waiting room right now. If they want to have a comment, or if first what we'll do, I think.
Mitch, just for
Go ahead.
clarification, what letters are not received?
Are we missing any outstanding letters?
We have
Nick
not
or
heard
Mike?
from the AgCom yet.
I'm sorry. So it says on here we have heard from AgCom. Tamika, have we heard from AgCom?
We have not.
So we are missing a letter from potential interest in this property. Do we know when they're set to meet next? We're waiting on that. Okay. So I think it would be beneficial. Again, I gave a brief overview. Our town administrator would like to give an overview of the process before we get started. Again, thank you for your patience. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a reminder, as you said earlier in the process, Chapter 61A is the Massachusetts general law that oversees land that has certain agricultural preservation restrictions attached to it. APR is something separate, but it is similar to this process. Under this statute, the city or town in which the property is located in, when it gets sold, that municipality has the right of first refusal on that property. It is the town of Rutland's policies and procedures that we seek input from the Conservation Commission, the Board of Assessors, the Planning Board, and we recently added the Agricultural Commission to that. The town has a right not to exercise its right of first refusal under the general laws. However, if it chooses to exercise that right of first refusal, it must also pay fair market value for the property in order to purchase it, as well as follow all necessary appropriation requirements in order to pay said sum of money for the sale of said property. So that is the general overview of Mass General Laws, Chapter 61A. And what we have here, this is a, it's up, the final decision is up to the select board. Mm-hmm. The other commissions can say whether or not they see that they have a vested interest in the property as having it as public land afterward. However, the final decision gets made by ratification or approval of the select board or final waiver of the select board. So even though a group says, yes, we have an interest in it, if the select board votes no, then that right of first refusal is thereby waived. So that is the overall procedure for 61A.
Understood.
Through the chair, if I can just recommend that the letter from the planning board be read so that the public is aware of exactly what it said.
Okay. Mike and or Nick, would you like to read a copy of the letter for the public?
Chair, this is the record from the Planning Board dated August 3rd, 2020. Dear Select Board, after reviewing the above request on July 28th, 2020, the Planning Board feels the town may have an interest in the above referenced properties for a potential future waste sewer treatment plant. Signed by Norman Anderson, Chairman of the Rutland Planning Board.
Okay, thank you. All right, I know we have a lot of interest in this. I hope that clears some of it up. Again, I would encourage everyone to please keep the conversation civil, and we'll open it up. If you could please use the hand-raising mechanism in Zoom. I don't know if that's the official name for it, but I am not tech savvy, and we'll try to recognize you as they come in. Mr. Jarvie. Kevin, name and address, and please feel free to comment. Mr. Jarvie, I think you're on mute.
Yes, Kevin Jarvie, 80 Hillside Road.
Yep.
I just wanted to, obviously start off by thanking everybody for coming on the call today to better understand. For me, it's the process, and I was well aware of the process many months ago. I came in front of the Select Board 8 or 10 months ago, asking the town if they had any interest in the property. Several members of other boards were in the meetings. So I did that knowing that this process takes place, that this 61A process takes place. So 8 or 10 months ago, I don't know the exact time or the exact meeting, it was in the basement. We had a discussion about this property and the other properties down here at Alta Vista Farm, including the brewery, the disco, all those things. And previous to that, I had offered it to the Rutland Youth Soccer as a potential site for soccer fields. Mm-hmm. And it's a little frustrating because I think back to a year ago when I was going to give it to the youth soccer for $1 a year. I was going to clear the trees, get the stumps out of there. I was going to do it all just because I didn't want, my initial intent was no houses, and this was a last resort. And that's why I went through the whole process. And I asked so many people in town for help and advice and what else can we do. So I just want to let you know that's where my frustration comes from, is that now at the 11th hour, it was, the planning board voted against soccer fields for this property, but now there's interest in a sewer treatment facility. It's a little hard for me to take that full circle. So with that being said, I submitted the proper paperwork for the lot subdivision, I believe 3 or 4 months ago. The planning board at that point approved all of the A&R lots, and they approved them as lots. All the members signed the Mylar. They all knew that this was going to be house lots at that point. The 61A to me at that point, 10 months ago, then 2 months ago, and now here I am, was honestly a small formality that we had to go through, but I preluded that multiple times with all the boards as to what I was doing so that we would stop something like this happening. Because now we're, as you said, 120
days. Mr. Jarvie, just to stop you,
yeah.
Will you still donate the land to the town for $1? That'll take care of the whole thing right there. If you want to just go ahead and do that, we'll take it.
I was going to lease it to the youth soccer. Are you going to not decimate the farmland over in?
I was making a joke with you, Kevin, and I understand your frustration. I know that you've been talking about this project. I know you've been talking about this project for a while. Please understand that the Board of Selectmen, this is not something that we brought up. This was brought to us, and we have to do our due diligence insofar as the legal process.
I understand that, sir. Yeah. And I just want you to understand, and everybody on the board, as you make your decision, that you fully understand what I've done over the last 12 months in preparation.
Understood.
For this. So I did everything I possibly could to do the due diligence needed. I delivered my paperwork after the Mylars were signed, after all that was done, it's already been recorded. They're already documented lots. My intent was not to sell all of them. There was 3 of them sold. There's still another one that was not sold at this point. So now this would force me into, you would take that by, you're right, even though it wasn't up for sale, it's still, so there's a lot of other moving parts. We don't have to get into that with everybody on the telephone. I'd just like to finish by saying, after the 2 months went by, 2 months ago, the Mylars were signed by the planning board. And then I delivered all the necessary paperwork. And I want to say Chairman, today we're creeping up on the 120 days because it sat for quite some time.
No, we're not, Kevin. We have until the end of October.
Not from when I put the paperwork in the town hall, sir.
No, we received the stamped in time paperwork in the middle of June, which I believe puts the 120 days into October from that point. That's when the clock starts. It's the 15th of October. I'm receiving clarification on that.
I understand that's when it was stamped, but when was it signed, the paperwork?
Again, that's the legal time frame by which we have to operate is the 120 days after it's been received and verified. So as part of that process, we send your application materials, my understanding, to our legal counsel to ensure that everything is in the proper order, which I believe your attorney did, and it was received and recorded in the middle of June. I also want to remind you too, again, that we have not received clarification from all of our boards and commissions yet about potential interest on this parcel. We're still waiting on AdCom.
I just spoke with somebody on AdCom, and they said that they did. I said, you guys didn't discuss the property and vote on it.
Again, I'm not taking stock in private conversations. We have to receive a letter from AdCom.
Okay, I fully understand that. And I hope you understand, Mr. Chairman, I am all about policies and procedures. I am, and that's why I did what I did. And then that's the first part of my whole discussion is that I believe that I did everything I possibly could. I offered it to the town. I offered it to everybody I could. And there was absolutely no interest whatsoever. And then in regards to the survey, you had said 10 plus years ago. That's not true. It was in 2012, so that was 8 years ago that the survey was done on the property.
I thought it was 12
okay.
years
I just want to make sure, again, everybody has the facts. It was 8 years ago that a survey was done, and it was found least favorable, and it was not deemed necessary to discuss that property in any way. It wasn't large enough. There wasn't the right soil. It was too close to reservoirs. There was a mountain of reasons that there should not have been the sewage treatment facility, not even including the roadways, the ins and the outs, the people, the smell, all of that. Just as far as the actual site itself, the only benefit to that site was the demographic and the closeness to 122A. That's
Understood.
The only benefit that I read in the report, unless somebody else has any other opinions on that. And I noticed that the head of the DPW is here, and maybe he can discuss that if other people have specific questions. But what I would like to ask of the board, and I understand it's you meet every 2 weeks. If we find out if the AgCom had already, and maybe they forgot to send the letter, is there a way to vote tonight in lieu of the AgComs? If AgCom passes it and says, okay, and I'm honestly not asking for myself at this point, Chairman, I'm asking for the people that after we got approval of lots, after we got all of the approval from the town, after the DPW was aware and knows of the tie-ins, the engineers are already working on that with the DPW for the tie-ins. The families that are buying the properties are getting dangerously close to not having stuff done by the winter time. And the longer that this delays out, and again, I had done everything on my end in due time, and I'm not sure where the lapse was.
Kevin,
but again, why my paperwork sat where it did.
Kevin, again, we have a legal process we have to follow. Now, we have to, in my mind, because planning board has expressed interest and it's a duly elected board, it is our responsibility to ensure that planning board at least has a conversation about what their thoughts were behind that process. Now, we just received that letter tonight. We're pretty far out from our 120-day window. Now, I can certainly sympathize with people that are buying the properties. However, both they and you knew that this process was in place and that it could take up to 120 days. We're still waiting on AgCom. Now, if we receive a letter from AgCom and we have a conversation with planning board, more than happy to call that vote, and that's the way the process is supposed to run. Now, in the meantime, there's other folks that I want to get to that have their hands up. Jeff, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. A year and a half ago, Leah and myself, we were on the board, and we were actively and vividly involved in discussion and debate about the soccer fields involving the Ag Commission. And I guess my question is, why is this the first I'm hearing of an option to have soccer fields for $1 a year on Prescott Street? Why is this the first we're hearing of that? And I know you were speaking in jest, Mr. Chair, but
they need a letter.
But I think there's merit to that. Can we re-explore the option of using that as recreation, soccer or otherwise. I don't think Little League or softball or any of that, those leagues would turn that down. But this, I don't recall, Leah, back me up on this one. I don't recall any discussion on that, and I'm all ears if that's still an opportunity for us.
Jeff, that's a good point. And again, I thank you for bringing that up. That predates my time on the board. I think when I came on, we were just in the middle of finishing the Glenwood lease. So I can certainly appreciate that perspective. And that's something why this process, Jeff, to answer your question, is in place, is so that the boards and commissions have the opportunity to speak about it. And I think what unfortunately perhaps has happened, I know, Kevin, you wanted to get everybody out tonight for this meeting. This is something that was discussed with Planning Board, and we have not heard, other than that letter, any discussion with Planning Board about their ideas for use of that parcel. And that's not something specifically in terms of wastewater or not that we were going to address tonight in this meeting, because really it's not something that we've been able to broach with them, having not received official word until tonight. But Jeff, that is a good point. Is there anyone else? Mr. Jarvie, I see you have your hand up again. And please unmute yourself, sir.
Yes, I did. I did unmute myself. I don't think that I don't think it's fair to put a wastewater treatment facility next to somebody's houses, and I don't think it's fair to do what's happening right now. The due diligence that was done on my behalf, the soccer is a whole nother deal. That was a disaster from day one. So the fact that nobody ever heard about it, that doesn't surprise me. They didn't do their due diligence if you never heard about it, Mr. Stillings. And I'm not sure, that doesn't surprise me at all. But now, at this point where I am, I have done things because of the path the town put me down. I stood 8 to 10 months ago and offered it to the town. Mr. Williams was in the room next to me. I asked him what we should do with this, and he's the one that requested this on the planning board. I'm curious if he's here tonight and if he can speak to why he chose to say it now instead of either 8 weeks ago when he approved it as house lots. He signed the Mylar, approved it as a house lot, and then I'm curious if he was notified in the last 8 weeks that there's any major changes from the study 8 years ago. And if there isn't, then I don't foresee any reason to even have a conversation about this wastewater treatment facility. Why ask for it now when he had multiple opportunities to say something about this in the past year? I've been forthright and honest with everybody, and now here we are full circle. It's not fair to me, and it's not fair to the families that are buying the lots. It's not fair to the people that are in the neighborhoods.
Mr. Jarvie, I understand, but there is a legal process that when you acquired the property, you knew existed. Now I have Mike Nicholson with his hand up that wants to have a point of clarification. And just before I recognize Mike, we're not talking about the merits of a waste treatment facility tonight as a board, because that was not brought up to us, that wasn't given to us, that was something that was brought up at the planning board. And I'll reiterate that this conversation is probably best had with the planning board as part of this process. I can't answer for Norm or Dick or Tim or Sean or anyone individually, but Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify the conversation that Mr. Jarvie did say did happen last year that predates a couple members of the board and was during my term as town administrator. Mr. Jarvie is correct. When we had the initial meeting to release the request for proposals document, the RFP, as it's commonly referred to, for the Glenwood Fields that went out last year, Mr. Jarvie was at that meeting and did say as an option, if we didn't want to proceed forward with the Glenwood Field, that he had an option that he would present to Rutland Youth Soccer, which was this parcel of land at that time. And that did not come to the board. No, that was a proposal that he said as a
so that's why Jeff would
option there. So it was during a public comment session before the select board. So that did come before that meeting about last March that was there. So I just want to clarify where that was in the past and when that was brought up in a public meeting. Thank you.
Understood.
Let's accept the donation.
Well, is Mr. Jarvie offering to donate the parcel to the town still?
I can't do that anymore.
Because,
for the last 10 months, I wasn't able to finish my statement, Chairman. For the last 10 months, I've built, and my entire business plan has revolved around this. This is the last thing I wanted, Chairman, but the town
Well, I know. I remember
on
you
every
and
time.
you and Jeff were very involved with the managed growth and the crafting of that. It just surprises me a little bit that we're going to be putting house parcels over on farming property.
I had no choice, sir. I had no choice. I
All right, no, I
offered
understand.
it multiple times. That well, I say you. I hope I'm not disputing that you understand, but on multiple occasions, what else can I do? I went to Little League. I went to everybody for this, and I would like to. I asked the question previously. If this is so important to the planning board, then how come nobody's on the call to answer these questions as to why they think this is a good idea?
I believe we have several members of the planning board on the call, Mr.
Well, then, I'm sorry, because all I'm looking at is just the screen, and you had said they need to answer the questions. If Mr. Williams is here, and if they're here, then I'd like to hear why they feel it's good now, and it wasn't two months ago when they signed the plan, when they knew it was going to be houses, they signed it and they said it was okay. So in the last 2 months, I'm curious what happened. That's my question.
Understood. I'm not sure if anyone in the planning board wants to respond, but again, this is not really under the purview of Board of Selectmen, so I can appreciate that. Nick, do you have any hands raised? Okay, we have Robin Farrington. Name and address, please.
21, Robin Farrington, 21 Cheryland Drive. Mr. Chairman, could you please reread the letter you received from the planning board in relation to this agenda item?
Yes, we can have that reread. Nick or Mike, or Nick, I think you have it pulled up.
Mr. Chair, dated August 3rd, 2020. Dear Select Board, after reviewing the above request on July 28th, 2020, the Planning Board feels the town may have an interest in the above referenced properties for a potential future waste/sewer treatment plant. Signed, Norman Anderson, Chairman, Planning Board.
Okay, and just thank you for rereading that. And just as a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, you had noted that there were a few members of the planning board here. Do we know how many?
Well, not enough to constitute a quorum because that would be inappropriate. So
there's 5 people, correct me if I'm wrong, 5 people on the board, the planning board, and there looks potentially to be 3 people from the planning board on this call right now. And even if that was not the case, so if there were 3 people on this call right now from the planning board, that does constitute an open meeting violation of the planning board. However, let me please finish. Since we do have members of the planning board on this call, as a resident who lives nearby to this particular area, I too would also like to ask the planning board members what their thinking is. If they're here on this call, I would like to know what the planning board's thought process is at this date with their interest in this property.
Okay, and before we continue, Robin, thank you for pointing that out. I unfortunately cannot see who is in this meeting. So if it is appropriate, one of the planning board members, please exit the meeting in order to avoid. Okay, I just heard that somebody did. So apologies there. Again, I'm looking at a screen in a room and I can't see everybody who's on it.
So you had 3 individuals from a 5-member planning board attending an open meeting of the Board of Selectmen, talking about a planning board issue.
Mike Nicholson.
That constitutes an open meeting violation, and I would also like to hear from the planning board members in attendance what their thinking is at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just received clarification that one of the members that was in as a member of the planning board, we have Tim and Karen Narwhal share a user account, and Karen was actually, who's on the FinCom, joined the call, and I believe that the headline was Narwhal's computer or something like that. So we've only had 2 members of the planning board not constituting a quorum in this meeting. So I just wanted to clear that up. I apologize for the confusion. Nick, you have.
So what I would like to hear from the planning board, what their thinking is.
I'm sorry, but this is a Board of Selectmen's meeting. If somebody from the planning board would like to speak, they can't do it on behalf of the entire board, only in their role. Again, I want to reiterate that because of the nature of this request, the Board of Selectmen received this tonight. There hasn't been any due diligence on our part with it. This is probably a conversation that's better suited for the board that made the request. And they can probably explain to you better at their meeting. But if there is a member of the planning board that wants to speak, they're more than welcome to. Otherwise, they're not obligated. Nick, I see that you have a hand. Sean, you're a member of the planning board. You raised your hand to be recognized. Did you go ahead?
Yes, I raised my hand because I am here, and fortunately, and I am a member on the planning board, but I am here for other issues. I am personally, as a citizen and a potential business owner in town, on the agenda. So I am not here, I would like to state, nor will I answer any questions about planning board.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I just wanted to put that out.
I think we have somebody else
Thank
with
you.
their hand up, Nick. We have Tony Martinelli. You are recognized. Name and address, please, sir.
Yeah, it's actually Anthony Martinelli, 18 Wachusett Street. I just have a couple questions. I'd like to know what would have changed since that original study was done where it was determined unfeasible to put a treatment like that there, and two, I guess you had made a comment a couple speakers ago about how you were surprised somebody would want to put house plots there on farming land, but what's the difference between putting 3 house plots and putting a disgusting giant water treatment sewage facility?
Again, this is not something that was broached by the Board of Selectmen. Those questions would be better directed towards the planning board, and if we want to perhaps have our DPW director into a planning board meeting to answer those questions or to provide more information, I'm more than happy to facilitate that. But again, at this point, we are merely discussing the legal process by which the town has to follow. Like most of you, we received the letter tonight in official capacity as a board. This is the first time the board is broaching it. And again, we as a Board of Selectmen are not at this time discussing any particular idea that was raised by the board. Again, we are still waiting on an outstanding board and commission to provide either their interest or denial for interest in the property. We're just talking about the legal process. So I'm sorry, Tony, but I can't answer those questions specifically. We have Nick. We have another. We have Mark Grattan.
Hi, Mark Grattan, 6 Rolling Ridge Road. I just want some clarification. I think everybody does. This 61A has a legal process that you guys have to follow, and the Board of Selectmen has the final say in what transpires with the 61A.
That's correct.
So put a request out to all the various planning boards, etc., to come back with if there's any interest in that property. You have heard from everybody except for AdCom at this point, and you have until the end, or rather October 15th, in order for the Board of Selectmen to waive 61A. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Once you receive that letter from AdCom, is there any other procedure that takes place before you guys put a vote to waive?
In terms of our own procedures, no, there is not.
Okay. So in all likelihood, a month from now, you guys would be putting this to a vote. I know you can't commit to something like that because you don't know when you're going to get the letter from AdCom. Correct?
It depends what is submitted by AdCom. And again, this is something that I'm not sure how the board would want to react, but that in the nature of your question, that would generally be correct. Yeah.
Okay. So you as the Board of Selectmen need to make an educated decision whether or not to waive 61A or not. So you are simply gathering all of the information you need in order to make that educated decision, correct?
That's reasonable, yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have Mr. Jarvie again.
I understand where we're at this point. I just want to make a comment that I'm disappointed that the planning board made this request and then didn't represent themselves, knowing that there was going to be the entire public on the call.
Understood and duly noted.
I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. It doesn't make sense that even a member would just get on just to say he's not going to say anything. Like if you're going to make the request, have a reason for it, back it up, and maybe I'm all for what's best for the town, but what's happened tonight isn't best for our local government. It isn't best for our town. It's not best for the townspeople. This didn't do anything but upset people even more. I can tell you that right now, because all that's happening is getting brushed aside, and now we're going to move on. If the select board has the final say, I think it's right to vote tonight on what's right. I'm working on Jesse Clay to send the email right now. AdCom did talk about this. They don't have the money. They have no interest. Why you didn't get it, I don't know. He's working on it at this moment. So
Kevin.
I'd like to ask everybody on the call to hang on for the night and see if we can get that email over. If you get the email from AdCom saying they're not interested, nobody from planning board showed up tonight, what else is there to discuss?
Kevin, again, you're talking about two different things here. We're talking about the planning board's interest and the express interest for the use of that property. And we're talking about a legal procedure that the town has to follow. I understand you are frustrated, but please understand that the Board of Selectmen in the role that we're doing tonight is merely following a legal process that we have to in order to dispense with the property. Okay,
Right.
so I understand that. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be entertaining last minute emails from board members so that we can have an expedited decision without hearing from all of our boards and commissions in due diligence.
And I don't want that and wouldn't ask you to do that, but I just hope you understand that this tonight shouldn't happen, and it shouldn't have happened. And it wasn't fair to me or the buyers of the property to bring this up at the 11th hour and then not represent themselves. And I don't understand.
I understand,
why
and that's
that
again, that's a conversation you can have with planning board. Again, this is still early in the 120 days we have. So in deference to what you just stated, that is not accurate. Again, this board's role is to make the decision. We have not received all of our due diligence yet in order to do that in accordance with our own policies. So I apologize that you feel that way. But unfortunately, we haven't received those communications. And again, the specific use that was proposed for the property, I watched some of the public meeting. I'm not privy to it, but that is a discussion that should be had with the planning board. I can't explain to you why that decision was come to during this process, other than that this is the process we have to follow. So do we have anybody else? Nick, you see we have a hand raised. We have Norm Anderson on the call that wishes to speak.
Hi, Norm Anderson, Chairman of the Planning Board. I just want to clarify a few things for everybody who's participating here. I guess first and foremost, the Planning Board is not in any way advocating for a sewer or water treatment plant on this property. We simply noted that a number of years ago, there was definitely a study to investigate the idea of the town building such a plant. And due to the proximity of this particular land to the sewer trunk line, we felt that it might not be a bad idea to at least just give this a cursory look to see if things have changed, if there is any sentiment about doing anything in this way. The other thing, and I just want to bring up, and this is more a personal thing, but I think probably most of our members feel the same. Over the past few years, the town has failed to take action on a number of parcels of land that were taken out of 61A, maybe rightfully so. But in terms of good planning, the town should be making provisions for its future needs for whatever town facilities may be needed in the future. Whether that be a sewer treatment plant, whether it be a school, whether it be a second fire station, whether it be recreational land or whatever. But once again, I just want to impress, and if you read our letter carefully, we did not say that the planning board was interested in the sewer treatment plant. We said we felt that the town might be. And that is where we feel then the discussion and the decision is in the hands of the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Thanks, Norm. You just seagulled us. I appreciate that. Okay. Well, again, we haven't received our clarification. I know Jeff had a question about possible recreation. I'll entertain a motion at this point.
Sorry, Mitch, if I may, I think I had a message that Jesse Clayman was trying to.
Again, we're not entertaining that. We're not entertaining individual messages from individual select board members.
No. He's on the call. He wants to speak and can't figure out how to raise his hand. And I see Mike Sullivan raising his hand also. I'm just looking at the screen.
Okay. Jesse, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Rutland Select Board, Jesse Clayman, 166 Main, also vice chair of the Rutland Agricultural Commission. There was a email, I believe, sent August 3rd. At least that's the letter that I have dated here. Whether you received it or not, I'm not sure, but I can read it to you here. It states, Dear Rutland Board of Selectmen, this letter serves to make official notice to the Select Board that the Agricultural Commission has no interest in purchasing the 61A parcel on Prescott Street. We would like to see it remain in agricultural use. So I will send that to you as well, but I do want to get on the call and make that.
Understood. I'm receiving word that neither of our TAs, nor the acting or Mike Nicholson, have received that communication.
Okay.
And I appreciate that. And again, I think the last line that you'd like to see it remaining in agricultural use, it potentially, once we receive it, I think that there's enough there to warrant a conversation that we need to have. We are within our 120 days. But again, I'll leave that to the decision of the board.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure that I will make sure you get that email, and just wanted to make sure you heard it now before you make a decision.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Nick, we have somebody else with the hand raised. Gianna Belsito, name and address, please.
Okay, it's actually Al Belsito. It's 9.
I'm sorry. That's the name that we're looking at on the screen.
Right, yeah, it's my daughter's computer. But not Al Belsito, 9 Fernwood Drive, Rutland.
Yep.
I just have one question. How can the planning board grant Mr. Jarvie the right to subdivide these lots and then in the 11th hour renege on their position?
You'd have to ask the planning board. I mean, it's my understanding those are two different procedures. But again,
they granted him permission to subdivide. Now you have 3 families scrambling. One family sold their property already in anticipation that their house is going to be built, and now they're in shambles.
Okay, do we have anyone else there? Mike Sullivan, name and address, please.
Mike Sullivan, 30 Crawford Road. Just an FYI, and
you didn't answer my question, Chairman.
Hello?
I'm sorry?
Chairman, I'm Mike. 1 second, please.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Al Belsito, I didn't get an answer from you. You just went right to Mike Sullivan.
Again, it's not our duty to respond for a question directed to the planning board. I can't answer that question.
Well, the planning board should have been in attendance tonight.
I'm sorry?
The planning board should have been in attendance tonight.
Understood. But again, this is the first time we've received any communication about this. In order to schedule a joint meeting, we would have to take time to do that. This is the first time we've received this communication. We haven't looked at it. We haven't talked about it as a board. So again, I appreciate your patience and I understand the nature of the question, but it's not something we as a board can address.
So if you get a confirmation from AdCom that there's no use for this land, is it going to take until October 15th for the select board to decide?
No, not necessarily, but that is the legal process we have until October 15th.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Sullivan, name and address, please.
Mike Sullivan, 30 Crawford Road. Just an FYI, and I know I've already taken probably more time than you wish I had.
Nope, I'm always happy to hear from you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having served on the RDIC for many years, in the past, every single 61A has come in front of the RDIC for a judgment on whether there was interest or not. And that, I'm guessing, was because the RDIC's responsibility is for all commercial or industrial properties in the town of Rutland. So
that's my understanding, but I apologize. I'm not familiar with that precedent. Go ahead.
No. It really, honestly, doesn't matter to me. I'm only pointing it out. I certainly support Mr. Jarvie's endeavor. 200%. I just, I'm hearing people saying that they're not getting responses from other boards. Well, you didn't get a response from us because we weren't asked, and I'm guessing the law perhaps does not require it. But given what's gone on in the last, 15 years in town, we've always been asked in the past. So
I think that's a good point, Mr. Sullivan. I certainly would like to take that up at a future meeting. I think that might actually probably be beneficial to the town. I apologize. I did not recognize that was the history behind that process, but I can certainly understand the value there.
Yep, no, I'm glad you do, because I do too, and we now agree.
Okay. Is there anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Anderson, go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to respond to the gentleman who asked about the creation of the lots. Any property owner, whether their land is under 61A or not, has the right under zoning regulations to divide their land into lots, assuming that they meet the zoning requirements. However, in order to then build a house, which then becomes a residential use as opposed to an agriculture use, that's what requires them to take the land out of Chapter 61A.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. We had Mr. Jarvie, I think you have your hand up.
I just wanted to reiterate, and this will be my final statement. I'm not gonna keep going around and around, but we have, and I always have been open to conversations, Mr. Chairman, and I hope that you personally and the rest of the people on the select board fully understand the frustration that I'm personally dealing with right now, because I spent a year asking for help from the town of Rutland, and now the town of Rutland is not really helping me too much. So I would just like to ask, as you think about it, you understand that for 12 months, even longer, I think as Mr. Nicholson said, I've been doing everything I can to save this place as best I can, and I needed to let go of a little bit. And that was the 8-acre piece. And I offered it on multiple occasions, and it was denied. And then it was again offered, and it was denied. And then it was offered, and it was denied. And then obviously some of the select boards didn't even know that it was offered, and that's frustrating. Now, at this point, I would like to fully understand the planning board. Mr. Anderson said that he believes the town, not the planning board, has interest. So that's already in your hands, the select board. It's in the hands of the select board. The Agricultural Commission has sent a letter so that they think it should remain agricultural, right? So there, that's great. If the town can pay the fair market value for all those lots and make a hayfield out of it, you can replace what you're taking out of Glenwood. Maybe that's an option. But other than that, sir, I don't see there is another option. I only hope that we can come to a decision quicker than October 15th. And if there's anything in the next 2 weeks before your next meeting that would potentially expedite that process, I think that anybody on this call would do anything that you ask to speed that process up. Extra letters, more research. I'll get back in touch. If we can rehire Weston and Sampson to take another look at the survey we got the money, let's do it. But I think it's a lost cause, honestly. And I just would ask, is there anything that I can do or anybody on this call can do to have a decision made 2 weeks from tonight?
Mr. Jarvie, again, we have a legal I want to remind you that we have a legal process that we're following.
I understand that.
I understand that, Kevin.
If there's anything else that can be done. And if there isn't, that's fine. And I'm not saying you have to have it on the agenda 2 weeks from tonight. I'm just asking, is there anything that we can do to expedite the process? Or is it just in the hands of the select board at this point?
Kevin, we've heard, okay. So again, we have a process. This is the first time we've seen it. All right, I'm not going to rush a decision unless the board feels like they want to and make a motion. However, we've heard several concerns tonight. One, that Jeff raised about him not being aware that the town was even offered the land for recreational uses. Two, from AgCom, which we never received an official letter. Now, Jesse was kind enough to hop on the call and provide information in his role as vice chair that the Ag Commission recommended that the land remain agricultural and not be subdivided into house lots. And we have a letter from the planning board, which the planning board has not had a chance to reconvene and discuss yet. Now, it's putting this board in a bad position to say that you have everyone that's willing to do whatever's necessary to rush a decision on this when we have a legal process and procedure and a right that's stipulated under 61A that we have to follow. All right, this is not something that is personal or anything like that. We go through this with every property that is in 61A, and we have to make sure that we follow these procedures.
I understand that more than
appreciate
anybody.
the comments, Kevin. I really do.
But that's
again,
why I offered it. And you say it's not personal, but then why is nobody heard about this yet?
Kevin, I can't answer that. I can't answer that question, Kevin. I can't answer that question. All right, this is the first time we're looking at it tonight. Again, I apologize. I'm more than happy to entertain any conversation that folks have. This is a letter of interest that was sent by the planning board. All right. We've had other statements made by AgCom that we can't verify. We haven't received anything official. And we have comments from our own select board members. So at this point, you know, I can promise you this will be an agenda item for the next meeting, and it will stay on the agenda until a decision's made. But we do have the legal authority to take the full allocated number of days to make that decision as a community. I think the concern that Norm voiced, again speaking in his role, was that there have been agricultural properties in the past that people have been disappointed on that the town didn't future plan to either use, acquire to maintain green space or whatever the point may be. And I think that's a valid point. People have those concerns. Those have to be talked about, and that's why we have a process. But insofar as I'm concerned, I'm not sure. I know what you're looking for tonight, and I can't speak on behalf of the rest of the board, but we haven't done our due diligence as a community yet. So at this point, I mean, I'll entertain a motion if there's a motion on the floor from any of our select board members. Okay. Hearing none, I guess that we continue the process. We'll have to move on to our next agenda item, which is going to be the town administrator update.
Can I make a request for that action item for next meeting, possibly inviting planning board to come after, if they have conversation at their next meeting? I think they're posted for tonight. I'm not sure if this is on their agenda or not. That they,
we can certainly coordinate with planning board. And I think it's probably appropriate, if you don't mind me, kind of piggybacking off of what you just commented, maybe AgCom as well.
That's good. Yep.
Okay. All right. Duly noted. Mike and Nick.
Mr. Chairman, this is Nick Monaco, the town administrator update. First part of business is a COVID-19 pandemic response. Nothing really has changed since the last meeting. We currently have 2 active cases in town, one I believe a middle-aged male, one a 15-year-old female. As far as town buildings go, all town buildings are currently open to the public except for the library and the community center.
Okay, thank you. Mike, is there anything you want to add? Nick, are you done? Mike, is there anything you want to add?
Just with that guidance, the governor did roll back certain regulations for the pandemic due to a statewide uptick. I do think it's worth noting, as Chief Monaco mentioned, that we as a town are not in an uptick, but the entire state is, and the regulations are a statewide blanket for us to follow. That is why the governor has indefinitely postponed beginning of phase 3B, in which case that was the phase in which libraries could reopen fully to the public, and senior centers full operation indoors at phase 4. So that is why those 2 buildings remain closed at this time. While we hope to see some information from the governor's office about his plan to make regulations countywide rather than statewide, due to our population being a lot more sparse than Suffolk County, which is where Boston is. Those have yet to be released. If those do change, we'll take a look at those as they come forward, but that is why those 2 areas of the town remain a little more restricted.
Understood. Thank you for that update.
Chairman, I'm sorry, but I saw Mr. Buckley waving his hands around at the end trying to say something. I don't know if he had a comment or if his hand
Sorry,
was up.
we have a DPW update coming up, Kevin.
Okay. I'm
All right.
just letting you know. I'm just making sure it wasn't in regards to I'm not trying to, my apologies. I saw him right, before anybody got anything. He was waving his hands around, so I didn't know if he was trying to speak. Sorry.
Thank you, Kevin.
Through the chair, I'll wait till the update.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on, we have an update on the town administrator search, first steps in the process. So we had a conversation about this in the last meeting. The board will recall, and we received clarification from our labor attorney in discussing with our town administrators here, as well as other communities, best practice, and what I know some of the other school committees have been doing, is to form an ad hoc subcommittee to handle the initial screening. I believe the actual language in the executive session itemized list is for initial screenings, pre-employment screenings. Due to the number of applications we have, in discussing that, Mike, Nick, and I kind of agreed that that was probably our best course of action to move forward. I did have a proposal that I wanted to pitch to the board tonight in relation to how to take care of that. In terms of timeline, or we'll go with the board first. So to establish an ad hoc subcommittee, best practice and what was presented to us would be to include 2 members of the board as to not constitute a quorum, and either at-large members or members from other committees. I do have a recommendation as a slate that I'd like to make to the board. What this ad hoc committee would do is over the next 3 to 4 weeks, conduct preliminary screenings of folks and present a final slate for public interview to the Board of Selectmen, who would then take over in the process. The individuals on this board that I am putting forth to serve would be myself as chair and Leah. I think that in having served as an officer on this board for the last 2 years, I certainly value the perspective there, and I think would be a good addition. I would want to include Chief Monaco, who is currently acting TA in an advisory capacity to the board, because I know that he's been handling a lot of the materials. The other folks that I think would potentially be good fits to serve in this capacity would be Mr. Joe Becker, who serves as vice chair of CIPC. He's also sat on this board for a good period of time, having been chair when we did not have a TA. Mr. Chuck Patterson, who is involved intricately with the fire brigade. He also served as the CFO for the town of Shrewsbury and is a Rutland resident. And Carol Ritchie, who is the town administrator in Paxton. I believe she's retiring this year. She's one of the best town administrators, I think, in the region, and she has a pretty great reputation, and she has volunteered to help us in this capacity. If that's something that the board wishes to entertain or take a look at, I'm more than happy to field that motion. Again, we're in terms of timeline, we're looking at having those preliminary screenings completed within the next 3 to 4 weeks and presenting a full slate of finalists for the board to interview publicly per best practice. And the board will then take over from there in terms of the hiring of the official. Is there any discussion? Motions? Mike, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to point out that that is correct, that initial screening is allowed under the open meeting law. Those would be considered executive session minutes of that ad hoc group that would then go forward to the board. Those final interviews must be conducted in open session, as we have done in the past. Search committees like that are a normal process. Just for the edification of the members of the public, we received about 22 applications as a result of the advertisements that went out in the Massachusetts Municipal Association, the town's website, the Worcester Telegram, and the Boston Globe. And that was the result of what we received. Those were compiled by Chief Monaco. I do know several of the applicants, so I have stepped back away from that process. And but I'm certainly happy to provide any technical, legal support.
And I do want to apologize. I can't read my own handwriting in front of me. It's Carol Riches in Paxton. I misread her name when I wrote it down, and that's on me. I'm sorry. And just to clarify, Mike, that is in line with best practice for what other communities do. I know, Jeff, you had your hand up.
Yes, sir. I got no problem with that list. Sounds great. Just wanted to ask, because prior search committees that we have had in the past, they were direct appointed by the TA themselves, or in this case, our acting TAs could serve that role in there. So the precedence of past search committees has been that the TA actually reviews and selects people to be on that committee. So I didn't know if we would be altering the precedence by having the board itself select who's going to be on that search committee, or should we?
Mike, you have your hand up.
Sure, Jeff, that's an excellent point to make, and I should have made that clarification when I was talking there. Those search committees that normally are appointed by the town administrator are for our general department heads. Because the town administrator is the direct report or direct appointment of the Select Board, whereas all other department heads except for the fire chief are the appointments of the town administrator. That's where the difference comes into those. So this would actually follow the precedent that was set before when Margaret was hired. That's where we got this process from.
Thank you for the clarification. All the more reason to have one or both former TAs in that search committee.
Okay.
So, through the chair, may I make a motion to accept this slate that you presented as our ad hoc committee?
Okay. We have a motion from Mr. Clark. We have a second from Mr. Nichols. Do we have any discussion? Leah, are you okay with me roping more of your time in for some duties?
Yeah, I'm all right. We'll have to, yeah, we can work around it for sure. I'm excited. Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion? Jeff, your hand's back up.
Just would there be any flexibility to add an additional member if the search advances?
To the ad hoc committee, there is not a member of the board because that would constitute a quorum, but there would be a potential. Mr. Patterson indicated, I know that in several of his other capacities with the town, he has to get permission from his employer due to the nature of his work. If they should not grant permission at that point, we'd have to revisit an additional person if we wanted an odd number of voting members. If you feel that's appropriate, if the board feels that's appropriate.
I got no problem with the list that you said. It would just be if something surfaced, like Mike Nicholson or somebody, for example, suddenly said that they had.
I think Mike just clarified that he had to recuse himself due to his familiarity with some of the applicants and his inclusion in some of the application materials, and I think that's why in having that initial conversation, Chief Monaco really stepped up and I think would serve that role in that capacity. Mike, did you?
Yeah, I can, to answer Jeff's question there too, I can certainly still continue to provide any type of procedural support for sure. It's just not having an official vote on that selection committee. So I can still be there for all of the discussions and just general, this is how the procedure goes, this is what we do, this is what the town administrator position entails, just without a final vote on who to send on to the final round.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anytime, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Whiteman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
Rossetti? Aye. Vote passes unanimous. So we have that update, and we're hoping to have a quick turnaround time on that. I know, Jeff, you had brought that up before. It's a concern of all of ours to get somebody full-time. All right, so I have my, Nick, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if we could just remind you that my agreement with the town for
that is
the first month and Mike's both expire between tonight and the next meeting.
So both and this was brought to my attention earlier, both Mike and Nick's agreements that were prior negotiated are set to expire between this meeting and the next. It is my understanding, after receiving clarification, that in order to extend these agreements, because they were negotiated prior, we would not have to go into executive session. We could take a board vote to extend both in their current capacities right now in open session as part of this update line item. That being said, I would entertain a motion to extend both Nick and Mike's agreements from the board.
Are both Mike and Nick okay with the extension?
I don't care if they are or not. I want them both here, so no, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Mike might need a lifeline at this point there.
I know. He told me earlier he was grabbing Dunkin' Donuts for dinner, and I felt really bad about that. But they both expressed that they're okay with the extensions if the board wishes to have them.
Absolutely.
All right. So can I get a motion?
So move. Stillings.
We have a motion from Mr. Stillings to extend Nick and Mike's previously negotiated agreement.
I'll second it.
We have a second from Clark. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
And Whiteman?
Aye. Thanks, guys.
Rossetti, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thanks for that reminder, Nick.
No problem.
I wouldn't want to be fielding calls. You telling me that we failed to renew you. Okay, so we're going into old business. We have approval of interdepartmental transfers. Do we have those?
Yes.
Yes, we do have those.
Mitch, can I just ask for clarification? Looking at the Google Doc, there's, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tabs. It's all 7, right?
I do not have, yeah, I'm receiving a thumbs up. I have the printed materials in front of me. I'm going old school. So yes, that is correct. 7 tabs.
Okay, thanks.
So we just go through these one at a
Yep,
time?
let's just go through them. If you don't, if nobody objects, we'll go through these real quick. Nick, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Chair, the first one is a request to transfer $91.20 from Town Administrative Purchase Services to Town Administrator Salary.
Mike?
This is caused due to leap year. There was an extra day in the year that wasn't budgeted for.
You know, of 2020, of course. We're going to have a leap year causing a transfer here. Okay, do we want to take these individually, or do we want to have Nick read them all and then take them as a slate? I'll leave it up to the board.
I don't know. In the past, I thought they said we had to read the account from and read the actual account number from and the account number. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yep. Okay. So we have that request from those accounts.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to transfer $91.20 from account number 001-129-5200-000, the Town Admin Purchase Services, to account number 001-129-5110-000, the Town Administrator's salary.
All right, I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Clark. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols? Aye. Wyman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Nick, next transfer.
The next one is requested $2,356.50 from account number 001-145-5140-000, Treasurer Secretary Salary, to be transferred to account 001-141-5120-000, Assessor Administrative Assistant Salary.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was caused to some transition that we had in the assessing office. When we started the fiscal year, the assessing assistant was part of our contract with Regional Resource Group, RRG, who does our assessing. During the fiscal year, they gave up having clerical positions under their umbrella. They're company-wide, so for all of their municipalities. So we regionalized this position with the town of Hubbardston. This did not work out during the trial run, so the town of Hubbardston and Rutland voted to forego that, just not to renew the IMA that we had in temporary for those 3 months. During that time where we posted for the position of the assessing assistant, Regional Resource Group filled that with a temp of their own personnel in there that was charging us a higher rate than what we were paying in the regional assessors, or the rate that we are currently paying to the person who's currently in that position. So that is where this $2,300 request comes from. It's the difference for what we had budgeted versus what we had to pay in the interim when we went in between that system there. And this isn't taking away from anyone else's salary. I do want to clarify that because it is coming out of a salary line item. The person who held the position of the Treasurer Secretary resigned partway through the fiscal year, and that position was not filled and is no longer being continued. So this is something that we just had left over in the year.
Okay, great. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, so moved. Do we have to read the account numbers?
We read them already once.
All right, Nick read them, so I guess we'll count that. And we have a first from Mr. Clark and a second from Mr. Nichols. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Clark?
Clark, aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Wyman?
Aye.
And Stillings?
Aye.
Resity,
Mike or
aye.
Nick? Oh, sorry.
Motion carries unanimous. I'm sorry, Leah.
Sorry, Mitch. I didn't mean to cut you off on that one. I have a question for this line item in the 2021 budget, is it budgeted correctly? Do you know? I wasn't following all the staff turnover and everything. I just wanted to make sure that it was budgeted properly for the upcoming year.
This position was budgeted for at the previous rate for the prior fiscal year that this staff member was having. A cost of living adjustment was given to other positions. This was not originally budgeted for in this position as we didn't have someone filled in at the time. However, I believe this person did have an adjustment in their pay rate after the cost of living adjustment was issued to all other employees. So it may be off by like $500, $500 to $1,000 at the most. But the budgeted amount was what we had in last for the hourly rate when this person was hired.
I thought because of the nature of the newness of the position, we didn't approve the COLA, or that wasn't approved by FinCom.
I'd have to look into that further. In my time as a acting person, I will have to do further research into that.
Okay, Nick?
I was going to fall on the sword for Mike during the transition period. I believe I made a decision to give her that COLA, not understanding the background.
Understood. No sword at all. Just asking point of clarification, so I appreciate that. Is your question answered, Leah?
No, that's good. Thank you. I couldn't remember. I know there had been some conversation about that, so thanks for everyone's reminder and refresh. Thank you.
Okay. We have the next transfer.
The next request is in the amount of $232 from account 001-176-5120-000, appeals clerical wages, to account number 001-176-5200-020, appeals purchased services.
This was caused due to an advertisement that had to be placed in the newspaper for a hearing, and their budget went over. That normally, this line item has $500 in it if we get it, and that's because the ZBA only meets as needed. We had a couple extra requests this past fiscal year in which another ad needed to be run in the paper per the legal requirements under the MGLs.
Okay.
Motion to approve as read, Nichols.
We have a motion on the floor to approve Mr. Nichols and a second by Mr. Clark. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Whiteman?
Aye.
And Mr. Stillings?
Aye.
Recity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Nick, go ahead.
Next one is a request in the amount of $525.93 to be transferred from account number 001-145-5140-000, treasurer secretary salary, to be transferred to account number 001-210-5111-000, police clerical wages. The reason for that one was the budget was based on a 80-hour work year, and turned out there were more days in the year than we budgeted for.
Leap year.
Yes.
It's the leap year. All right. Do we have a motion?
Motion as read. Approve.
All right. We have a first by Mr. Nichols, second by Clark.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols? Wyman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
Recity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Nick, what do we have? Two more?
Yes.
Yep.
$18.36 requested to be transferred from account 001-421-5120-001, highway part-time clerk wages, to be transferred to account 001-421-5110-000, DPW director salary.
Leap year.
I'm sorry, leap year. Yeah, it's another leap year. All right, do we have a motion?
Motion for approval as read, Nichols.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Nichols and a second by Mr. Clark. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Wyman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
Recity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Last one.
Actually, two more.
Two more.
Requested $3,753.35 to be transferred from 001-431-5400-000, town vehicle fuel, to be transferred to account 001-433-5200-000 waste disposal purchase services.
This is not leap year. This is Wachusett Earth Day has a agreement with their member towns for waste disposal. This is what their advisory board voted to increase their assessment against the town after the fiscal year had already started.
Okay,
And this is for the last fiscal year, not current fiscal year.
correct. Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved as read.
Whitman seconds.
We have a motion, Mr. Clark, to move, approve the transfer, and we have a second by Ms. Whiteman. Is there any conversation, discussion?
So, I mean, we don't have any discussion. They just tell us what they're going to charge. I guess I'm a little confused.
The select boards of all member towns for Wachusett Earth Day appoint someone who sits on their advisory board. That board then votes on these assessments and sends them out to the.
So who did we appoint that voted to increase the amount that we were giving to this agency?
This seat currently sits vacant on their advisory board.
That wasn't my question. Who voted to increase? So the vote wasn't to increase, happened while we weren't represented?
No, the town's representative at that time was Miss Sheila Dibb when that vote was taken.
Okay.
So is that a vacancy we need to be filling, right? Do we have that on our agenda?
Yeah, that was announced at the last meeting when we had appointments done. There were a couple seats that still remained vacant, and that was one of those that was listed as still being advertised and looking for someone interested to serve in that capacity, as is the representative to the Worcester Regional Transportation Authority that also sits vacant at this time.
And Mitch, if I may, those two positions are generally from the board, so that one of the five of us.
Understood.
I'm asking. I don't know.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that it's one of us that would represent at those meetings.
Okay. I'll look into the meeting schedule and see if I can swing one of them. I'm not sure if I can or not, but I'll look into
that on our next agenda.
Yeah, I guess we'll put that, Mike and Nick, if we can put those openings on our next agenda, and we'll see if we can get those filled. Very exciting work. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Whiteman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Guess we're spending more money. All right. So last one.
Final one
Final
is
one.
requested $2,382.30 to be transferred from account 001-914-5100-000 town health insurance to be transferred to account 001-916-5100-000 town share Medicare.
Mr. Chairman, we estimate what Medicare will cost every year. We don't get that bill until the January 1st
Correct.
of every year. And it's so when the town treasurer makes that budget that she submits to the town administrator's office, it's her best guess as to what it will be.
Pretty close guess.
Yeah. She did increase that line item in the current fiscal year's budget to try to see if we can get closer to what it is, so we don't have to keep making these transfers at the end of the year. So that is what this is here. It was last year's fiscal year guess that was different than what was received in January.
Okay. How come the costs never go down? They just never seem to go down. So.
Motion to approve as read, Nichols.
All right. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? A motion was made by Mr. Nichols, second Mr. Clark. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Whiteman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Okay, moving on. We have an old business item, 009, marijuana RFI update, timeline for retail and cultivation license negotiation. I think we had an update the last meeting. And Mike, I think you had indicated at this meeting we would have something substantial either to sign or to look at.
So I spoke with Attorney Costanza today. I should also say that I did have a text message conversation with Mr. Sean Moore from Mass Home Growers. Attorney Costanza had sent an initial document to Mass Home Growers. Mr. Moore had some suggestions on edits that he would like to have seen. Ms. Costanza is looking in, Attorney Costanza is looking into what the legal process is, just because there was some stuff that went outside the scope of just a cultivation facility that the board had voted on before, and if the board needed to approve of those before those negotiations continued, and that is adding manufacturing and retail to those host community agreements.
I mean, it's my understanding again that we just moved on the retail and cultivation. There was nothing else included with those, correct?
If I may.
I'm sorry, Mr. Moore. My question was for Mr. Nicholson. If you could just give me a second.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, as a result of the the request for information and interest proposals that the board issued forward, the board voted to go forward with cultivation for mass home growers and retail for caregiver patient connection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Moore,
through the chair.
Go ahead.
Again. Yeah. No offense to KP Law. That was an old request, and I've since dropped that and decided just to stick with the cultivation. And she sent me a contract that I went over, and I asked a couple of changes, which weren't, and I sent a list of those changes to Mike as well as Ms. Costanza. And I haven't heard back anything from Ms. Costanza or Mike about the changes to the contract, which, please, it is very fair, and I would like to say that to the town. The changes that I have hopefully will benefit the town more. If I may, I could explain those. But those requests that Mike just listed, those are old requests, and like I said, no offense to KP Law, but they kind of lack on their what's the word I'm looking for? Just their lack on their duties, getting back to things. Mike, have you received and looked at the changes that I wanted to the host community agreement?
Again, it's my understanding before we go any further that we cannot discuss matters of negotiation during this meeting. It's more just procedural, Sean.
Okay.
So I want to be careful that we don't cross that line. Again, this was just an
Sure.
update. I was unaware of where we stood on the actual contract. So I think, unless Mike has more to provide, that's probably all we can actually provide you right now at this time.
Okay, which is what?
What Mike just indicated, that the proposal is under review, again, due to the proposed changes. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah. So, and I understand they're old changes, but I mean, until we hear a go ahead, that's kind of where we are in the process. Mike, I do have a question for you about the other company that we've awarded for the retail. Have we heard any communication from them? We have. So they're active. Okay, I just want to make sure, it's been a little while, that we're on track with those projects. So everything's moving along. Okay, great. So that's really all we have tonight for that update, is my understanding. Is that correct, Mike?
Okay. So, Mike, I don't think. Forgive me, I didn't hear if you answered. Did you receive the email that I sent out for the changes that I would like Ms. Costanza to look over for the host community agreement?
Yes, the town did receive those.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause in there it didn't state any of those changes that Mike mentioned. So Ms. Costanza needs to either check her emails or because I'm just going to stick with cultivation.
Okay, we could certainly follow up again as to where they are in that.
Thank you.
And we'll certainly we'll keep it on the agenda for the next meeting. These things kind of, I know they take time, but it's also been lingering, and I think that we've just been discussing this for a year and a half. So start moving on some of it. Okay. So the next old business item, the transportation assessment, I think we talked about that. There haven't really been any updates, my understanding. I know the school committee voted, but we don't have any updates, so we can just move on. New business, we have Director Buckley for a DPW update regarding current projects taking place and water sewer bills. Mr. Buckley, are you there?
Director Buckley did. Oh, he is? Okay. I know he got booted.
He is in there. We're gonna try to get this going here. Bueller. Okay. Does it have to be unmuted on his side, or are we?
He's up there now.
Joe, I see you. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I got bumped out again.
Oh, there we are. All right.
So it's my understanding before I got here, and a couple of previous select boards before the current group now, because of the expense associated with transporting and treating wastewater out of town, the town elected to do some research and find out if it was possible to do wastewater treatment in town. They then contacted their consultant, Weston and Sampson.
Joe, just to clarify, Joe, the items on the agenda were for updates regarding the current projects in town. We know you have some capital projects that are moving forward, and the water and sewer bills.
I understand that.
Right. I think the item you're referring to is probably best saved for a future conversation, given the nature of it and the nature of where we are with the boards.
No, I understand that. In brief, then, I will send on I just wanted to get you up to speed as to what DPW did relative to this information.
Understood.
It's important to get out there that we were kind of caught off guard. No one from DPW was soliciting construction of a wastewater treatment facility at this time, nor did we advocate for that as part of our plan, our capital plan. We just drafted a relatively aggressive 5-year capital plan to deal with sewer infrastructure. This was not part of it. So unfortunately, I have to get some of the information out there. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Joe, we can certainly do that. And again, I think everybody's on the same page with this being a new issue that's come up. Again, we have to do our due diligence as a community and work with the other boards. And I could certainly appreciate your expertise in this matter and your willingness to share as much information as you have.
In brief, what I did today, I got a hold of the engineer who did the original study and wrote the final review and recommendation for the parcel. I got that information probably about 6 o'clock by email. I'll make that available to yourself and the other chairs of other boards so they can make that information available to anybody to review.
Thank you. We'll certainly do that. Thank you, Joe. Okay.
What I can tell you is it didn't look all that, the perspectives weren't that great.
Understood. Thank you. Again, we're going to move forward and have the items on the agenda for the update. Appreciate that. And we're going to have, I'm sure, further conversations once everyone has a chance to review the materials and we hear from all of the applicable boards. So thank you. We have a DPW update for current projects taking place in town and water and sewer bills, which I know we've received a lot of calls, a lot of emails, and a lot of people pulling other people over and asking them questions about it. And just, I know that you've been very active and proactive in sharing that information and putting that as much as you can out there. So if you just want to give us an update on those two things, we'd appreciate it.
All right, I'll go through the capital projects first. DPW just completed the water contract which is just over 2,000 feet of new water main in the Inwood Road area. That consists of phase 1 and phase 2. Most of it was 8-inch water main, replacing updated 6-inch asbestos cement pipe. A lot of that pipe was problematic and led to several breaks. We have 3 more phases to go, but the worst of the area has been replaced. Those streets will be left in binder, or the trenches will be left patched for the winter. We anticipate some settlement in those roadways, and those roadways may dip a little bit through the winter, and they'll be repaved in the spring. Other water capital projects that are ongoing consist of the rapid sand filters, or the sand filters at the treatment facility being repaired and updated. 2 have been completed. We have 1 more to go. On the wastewater side, we put a contract through Weston Sampson to do inflow and infiltration research on the DCR trunk sewers. That's all been completed. We have some interim reports and some suggestions on where we want to go. The final report has not been released yet. Once that's made available, I'll send that on to the board. Any questions so far?
Mr. Chairman, just one thing I'd like to add, because I believe Director Buckley deserves a lot of credit towards this. When the TV work of the DCR lines for their infiltration and inflow studies wasn't something that was initially proposed when we were thinking about this program, but then when we were sitting down with DCR and it came up that they just wasn't on their radar to TV these lines, Director Buckley was like, oh, well, we'll do it then. We already have a capital plan set up. And there was a portion of those sewer lines where we couldn't get the camera through because of the clogging and the status of those lines that were there. So we were actually able to get so much more data on our issues with our sewer system just because of that idea Director Buckley had, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, and it gets us into a spot that we haven't been at before as a town, and that is excellent in terms of our forecasting outlook on where we need to go and what we need to do to bring those accounts more stable so we don't have what happened last year again.
Great. Sounds great. Do we have any questions for Mr. Buckley on any of his updates?
The water sewer
or in general, on the capital projects in general?
If I may, through you, for Director Buckley, have the Inwood Road neighborhood area folks that have been affected by the repair work that's done, and then the road that has binder down but won't be repaved until the spring, are they aware that it won't be repaved until spring, or just so that there's some sort of communication that they know that it's coming? It's just kind of best practice to let it sit and settle a little bit.
I believe we made that information available to that neighborhood already.
Yep.
Okay,
I think there was a letter that went out, Joe. Is that kind of yeah? Okay, to abutters. Skip, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted an update on what was going on up in the center of town by the post office and drugstore. How did it all come about?
Mr. Buckley, did you hear the question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to formulate. The select board member caught me off guard, and I just want to figure out the best way to formulate my answer. Did the chair forward on my original email about what we did up there? Has everyone been? I'm glad to do it, but did that get forwarded on?
Let me take a look.
Yeah,
yes,
I
sir.
saw it.
Yeah, I think it was.
Some of the statements made in it. You know, you said it was a hayfield one time and all that.
Yep.
I don't know where you got your information from, because I know I lived in this town quite a few years, and it was never a hayfield in my time. But anyway,
Well,
I just was curious why we took so much of our manpower and time, and when we got problems all over town with potholes and this and that and the other, and why we spent this kind of time up there and money.
Well, frankly, we didn't spend a lot of money. We did use town resources that I'll agree with. We were able to get all of the gravel from the Inwood area for nothing delivered to the site, and we were able to use it to shore up the parking lot and add some more spaces and make it stable. Like I said in the memo that I sent on to the chair, at that point we decided to cut back the scrub brush and clean it up. The motivation was simple, just to make sure that people couldn't do illegal dumping in there. There was no other illicit problems in that basically wooded area. We just decided to clean it up while we were there.
Yeah, but who made the decision? You, or I don't know that anybody on this board is aware of how it came about.
DPW is responsible for maintaining all town facilities. I did notify both the town administrator Nicholson and the then chair Sheila Dibb to tell them that we were doing that work. I don't think we need to notify the board that we're doing basically cleanup of a dirty lot. I'm sorry.
Well, when it comes to spending town money, it might be a good idea if the boards are aware of it. I mean, not that they would have been denied, but I don't know.
Understood. Mr. Stillings, I see your hand is up.
It is. Thank you. I appreciate Skip's perspective on that, and just wanted to share I take a different perspective. on that. When the construction or the work, the green work behind the post office began, I did reach out to Mr. Buckley. He responded quickly and succinctly on exactly what's going on there. And I think it's a very good use of excess soil and I don't know what the word is, but refuse from the Inwood Road project is my understanding, to utilize that to add those extra spaces. But also, more importantly than that, the greening up of previously brown areas behind that, especially in the downtown area. I think that might be something when we get back in the swing of things for the 4th of July parades and certainly for the fireworks, to be able to have some sort of an open space for those venues. I think it's very forward thinking. So I do take, with all due respect to Mr. Clark, I take a different perspective on there, and I think it's applaudable for Director Buckley to be using the resources, recycling those resources in there.
You got to recycle them right at the highway barn, stockpile it for later use. My problem is that the manpower used could have been used for plugging potholes and cutting brush and whatever on the side of the roads to make the town look nicer on the outside. But that's all.
Do that too.
I'll let it go at that. Fine.
No, I think, okay, I think that there perhaps was, and I understand what Joe's saying, I understand what Skip's saying, and I certainly can appreciate Jeff's input. Maybe in the future, this kind of thing, this conversation could be perhaps cleared up. If there's a project going on, obviously we've all probably received fielded questions from members of the public about what's going on over there. I know that particular green space was the subject of a grant that we applied for a pocket park, which was not funded, which would have been a fundamentally different project, but there was some cross communication there, I think, in the public. I feel there's some concerns about work making it into a park. So perhaps if there's future projects, Joe, and I know that this probably doesn't meet the letter of what your responsibilities are to a T, is perhaps making the boards aware of the work that's going on before it occurs, if it's going to change the topography or geography of an area, just in anticipation of those questions. I know that your communication went to Mike and Sheila, but unfortunately it wasn't communicated to the other board members during open session. And I think maybe that's where some of the cross confusion came from. And I think I'm hearing the same thing from Skip and Jeff, in the sense where Jeff called to find out what the project was. Maybe we could be a little bit more proactive about understanding those things before they get undertaken. But I certainly applaud your efforts. So thank you there. I mean, is there any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to just get an update on the expansion at the community center. Parking. Several years ago, funds were voted at town meeting for expansion of that parking lot, and I want to know where that's at.
I'll have to get back to you on that one. That article was passed before I really took over. I don't have an update on that. What drove the schedule on this other parking was simply we were able to get some material for free.
Understood. All right, so maybe we'll have a follow-up update on that. And then, Nick?
Mr. Chairman, I did communicate with the administrative assistant at the Board of Selectmen's office. She's looking into that article to get the details on it. So it's we definitely looking into it.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think the next item, I'm sorry, is there somebody else that had a question or comment? Joe? Okay, so we were on to water sewer. Joe, you have one more thing under the capital projects?
Yes, actually, a couple. The next one is the sidewalk work on Maple Ave. There's been a lot of back and forth sidewalk work on Maple Ave. I sent out an email updating the board on that as well. Do you know if that was forwarded on?
Yes, it was.
You need me to brief?
Sorry, can I ask who's forwarding these? Because I searched my email and I don't have them. So I vaguely remember seeing something about the update on the green space by the post office and stuff, but I can't find it now. And I don't have any update on the Maple Ave sidewalk thing, I don't think.
In brief,
I believe Mike.
I can forward that over to you, Lee. I'm pulling it up here on my phone.
I believe the original was forwarded on by administrative staff, either the TA or Laura. I'm receiving word. Would have forwarded that. That was a little while back too. So, Joe, go ahead.
I'll just be brief. Like I mentioned in the update regarding the sidewalk, we had the stretch of road in question surveyed to make sure there was enough room for a sidewalk to meet current ADA requirements. After reviewing the project and trying to go after complete streets money, we decided to hire an engineering firm to do a sidewalk design so that we can get access to the complete streets funds. The preliminary designs are done. The most complicated part of the work is the elevated part of the walk, or what some folks call the bridge. That's going to either, we're either going to have to move the sidewalk to the other side of the road, or possibly take that bridge down, put a new retaining wall in, and keep the existing sidewalk in its location, but abutting the roadway. So that's really what will drive the cost on the project overall. Do you have any questions?
No. Is there any questions from the board members about the sidewalk on Maple Ave? Jeff, was that your hand? It was not Jeff's hand.
It was, sir, but not
okay.
about the sidewalk. I do have my hand raised.
Yep. Go ahead, Jeff.
I just backing it up a little bit. I think as a board, the select board, I think it's important for us to maintain the focus and position to our department heads, the police chief, fire chief, and DPW chief, recognizing that they are strong chiefs, if you will, and they have executive authority to make these decisions on things within their purview in there. And just closing out by perhaps if we had regular updates, something like the lot behind the post office, that'd be something that would be nice to hear during a regular update in there. But I think it's important that we support the position of our chiefs, that they are executives overseeing their department, and that they don't need to get too deep into the weeds with the select board before making decisions on stuff.
Understood. I'm not, it wasn't really related to the sidewalks, but yeah, no, I certainly can agree with that. I think we're all supporting Joe. It's more just a miscommunication there on that project. And, at the end of the day, we're the executives for the community. If we're fielding questions, I think we need to be able to know what's going on. Particularly where there was a project like that where it was put in as part of a grant application. And that's not to say I don't support it. I mean, I think Joe's doing a great job over there. It's just that I know that I fielded some questions about it, which I've asked him, and he was gracious enough to forward on that communication. I just think maybe things have been crazy the last few months, and we've gotten away from some of our more regular updates, and maybe that's kind of why that occurred. But I just want to make sure the board is informed in case those instances come up. Jeff, I'm totally on the same page with you there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo your statements that Joe is doing a great job over there.
Absolutely.
Great feedback from the community and his employees. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Keep up the good work, Joe.
I just wanted to check. I didn't know if there were any kind of departmental meetings anymore. I know with the transition and the acting town administrator and stuff like that, communication with the departments is important, and I don't really know how that's being handled right now, especially with the pandemic. And I think it'd be a good idea to have some kind of, or if there is some kind of meeting on, I don't really know, but I just want to make sure there's some kind of group communication for the town.
Mike, Nick, I think you guys have been pretty close contact with your department heads. Maybe
Sure, yeah. So during the transition, I've tried to keep regular contact with everybody. I visit the different departments and try to just keep in touch with everybody. We haven't had a formal meeting yet since the transition, but we could probably squeeze one of those in.
And I understand that. But I just think it's beneficial because then all the departments hear what's going on with the other departments. So I think there's a benefit to it. And like I said, I understand during these conditions it's difficult, but I would encourage that something be put in place for that.
Right. Great. Okay, perfect. Nick, do we have any more questions or comments about the projects that were addressed by Mr. Buckley before we move on to water sewer updates? I was informed that Mr. Jarvie, your hand is up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I had put it up at the beginning with Mr. Buckley, and I just wanted to make sure that at the beginning it sounded to me, sir, that he wasn't going to be afforded the opportunity to have that discussion about it. And I had asked him, questions directly.
About what, Mr. Jarvie?
about the wastewater treatment facility, and I didn't know if he was trying to speak at that time when the rest of the public was on the call, and he wasn't afforded. You know, there were about 40 people that didn't hear what he just said, and I just want to make sure that if he had tried to say that, I had asked questions in my comments specifically about this, and if it was feasible for the DPW, or if anybody had checked with him, or so I wanted to ask those questions of him, and I just wanted to make sure that he had the chance to tell you. Nobody came to him for this. Nobody checked with him. I mean, this.
Again, Mr. Jarvie, tonight is the first night that we are seeing it as a board. We have not acted on this because it is the first night we are seeing it. Okay, so again, we have a process we have to follow, and I appreciate your input.
That's all. I'm just making sure that he had an opportunity to speak.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, great. And so we'll move on to water sewer updates. Thank you. Joe, go ahead.
Going on to water and sewer. Next time DPW comes in to talk about capital projects, we still have to discuss the Palmagussit Road update and the 90 funds and where they're going. Okay?
Okay.
Regarding water and sewer, do you mind if I just do a brief review for people who may or may not be watching?
Sure. I mean, that's kind of, I know you've been very proactive in getting information out, which I certainly appreciate. There's been a lot published through the town's social media, as well as through, I believe, the DPW webpage about kind of, I think you even have a tool out there for a mock bill. So you could put in your usage and see what that calculation would come to, which I think is very proactive and really pretty innovative. So if you could just speak, a little bit, I know there's been some discussion in the community. I know you've received a lot of calls. If you can just kind of speak a little bit, kind of an overview as to some of the issues and how the department's treating everything.
All right. For the record, the current water and sewer rates were passed last July. The reformation of the water and sewer utility took place at the meeting in 19, and that goes for 3 years. The reformation of the water and sewer enterprise utility I just mentioned was we followed closely the recommendations made by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. The accounts are currently liquid, and we're able to do what we need to do to pay our bills. What I think happened in this last quarter's bill, like I mentioned online, we read meters early going into the pandemic. We had genuine concerns that we wouldn't have water staff available to do the reads later on. And what that means in plain English, we put people at home on standby and kept one person at the plant at a time. So consequently, the time frame of this quarter was almost 3 weeks over what it typically would be. But the previous one was 2 weeks shorter. As soon as we could get the meters read, they were read. I think the things that people are seeing, like I mentioned online, there's a lot more people at home. People who typically go to the office every day are working from home. Kids who had been at school are home. And again, this quarter was April, May, and June. The other thing we noticed a lot, and I've gone through maybe 40 or 50 individual bills for folks and looked at what their water use or how they use water. In 2017 and 2018, the folks who saw really high bills seemed to use the same amount of money this last spring for either watering gardens or watering lawns. There's definitely a trend. Somebody will call up and say, well, I've never used that much water before. And we'll go, and again, when we talk to residents, we only look at usage. We never look at what they actually pay, because we need to make sure we can compare apples to apples. And oftentimes we'll find out in 2017 or in 2018, these folks used a similar amount of water for the same time frame. 2019 was a very wet spring, and we had a lot of wastewater problems as a result of that. But that's probably why they didn't see that same hit a year ago. I hope that clears some of it up.
It does. And if I can just, before we move on, I know you inherited a lot of work in a tough situation. I certainly appreciate, and to echo Jeff's sentiment, the work you've put into this and being as responsive as you have. I think it's a testament to that department. And I certainly can appreciate you clearing that up. Now, Mike, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Director Buckley said. Back in a pre-pandemic meeting of the select board when Director Buckley provided his update. He did state publicly before any of the pandemic stuff happened that while the rate study that was submitted by the Abrahams Group last year suggested we increase rates a little bit every year, Director Buckley said he didn't think that that was something that the town was going to need to do at that time. So we haven't increased rates since the select board met to do that last July, in July of 2019.
Understood.
Just because there was some confusion about that, and I had a couple of voicemails on that. I just wanted to clarify that this is something we said pre-pandemic or any of that.
Yep.
Right there.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Are there any questions for Mr. Buckley?
I have a couple other things I just want to verify. I had some notes.
Okay, go ahead.
Looking at some of the comments that were made to the town's Facebook. Somebody repeatedly asked if we had spent any money on water and sewer infrastructure because we borrowed the money as part of setting up this new rate. And we spent about $250,000 in leaks and wastewater system, mostly in the DCR sewers. And I think when the leak will be in a position, and we spent about $500,000 on water infrastructure improvements in the inland road area, and then maybe $100,000 at the plant overall. So we have spent money. The rates were not raised just to borrow money to make infrastructure improvements. The rates were raised as a result of the independent, let me just back up. A lot of folks called for an independent study. We did that. The rates to cover our bills. What was in there was we had two options.
I think we're having a technical difficulty with the Zoom channel. Joe, you cut out. I think what Joe was getting at was that we had an independent study come in for a rate study. That rate study yielded the simple fact that our expenses and revenues were not aligned and that we could not cover our costs, which, I mean, you know, very thorough study to come to that conclusion, but that's why those rates were raised in the first place. And I think that with folks home, they're probably seeing some of the impact of that they hadn't seen prior. We'll wait to see if Joe gets back on. If he does, we'll circle back to his items for updates. In the meantime, I have word that we're calling him, putting him on speaker, but oh, there he is. All right, here we go. We're going to try this out.
All right, Joe, you're on.
All right, thank you, everybody. Sorry about that. For whatever reason, I keep getting bumped out. So the rate structure allowed for us to pay our bills, but at the same time, we knew we had to make capital improvements. We had two options at the time. Oh, I'm back. Hold on. We had two options.
Joe, you there?
You're muted, Joe.
Sorry about that.
Joe,
So-
I heard the communications issues are only happening in Holden. If you had moved to Rutland, this probably wouldn't be happening. So go ahead.
My parents still live in town. It's nice to be close to them.
Absolutely.
So we could have raised rates even more if we didn't want to borrow money to make the necessary infrastructure repairs. To keep rates down, we found it was cheaper to borrow the money. So again, there was some confusion out there. People thought that we only raised rates to cover deficiencies in the system. We had to raise rates because we couldn't pay our bills. We had gotten in trouble in theory for deficit spending, and that's how DOR defined it. And when we did pass this most recent budget, I was asked repeatedly if we had to raise rates, and I said no, because if we put ourselves back into a deficit spending situation, we would be violating state law.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Is there anything else on the water sewer, Joe?
One little one, there's a lot of back and forth about the tiered rate structure. Like you said, we did a 2-page tutorial on how to do the tiered stuff. That's the smallest part of most folks' bills. The biggest charge that folks are facing when they use a lot of water seems to be wastewater charges if they don't have a second meter for irrigation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that being said, thank you, Mr. Buckley. If there are no questions regarding the update, certainly appreciate it, and all of you and your department's hard work.
Thank you.
Moving on to we have under new business nomination of a town official to serve on the Wachusett Regional School District negotiation team. That's another one of those seats that's currently usually filled by a Board of Selectmen member. At this point, I will entertain any volunteers, or if any other members wants to throw another under the bus to serve in that capacity. Now would be time to do that. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Nick.
This it's actually a nomination for, so you would present somebody for nomination that 2 weeks from now, we would present to the school
Right.
district, and that nomination, they would pick one municipal representative from the 5 towns to sit.
So
in
right, so
executive
we're nominating someone that would then be picked. Again, I did, the throwing under the bus was in jest. We know the buses aren't running this year, so we'll certainly, if we want to nominate someone to throw their hat in the ring would be the appropriate term to get.
Would you be interested in Leah?
No, but I was going to ask Mitch if he was interested, given his, I know a lot of his background is higher ed, but I wasn't sure if he was interested, given his education focus.
I'm more than happy to do it if the time permits, and we'll see if Rutland is picked. If anyone else wants it or has any nominations, if not, I'm more than happy to volunteer. Mike, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just again to reiterate, the group that chooses which one of the 5s is the 5 representatives from the town. So the
Right.
5 of you would meet together and then decide amongst yourselves who would be the one to move on to sit with the school committee for the
It's
negotiations.
who gets the rose or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, that
Final rose
sounds about
ceremony.
right. Okay, so yeah, if anyone else, if anyone else wants to volunteer, I'm more than happy. Otherwise, I'd be more than happy to do that. Nick.
Just a side note that meeting is 2 weeks from tonight at 6 o'clock.
So it's going to, we'll have to either have somebody else take over the chairship, or we can schedule a different time. for our
Right. It also
meeting.
says you could designate somebody to act on your behalf.
Or we could designate somebody to act on my behalf, just because we're, again, handing out the rows to see who gets picked for that position. So I'm more than happy to serve in that capacity, unless anybody else wants to. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll figure out what we're doing between then and now and get somebody over there.
Do we need a motion on that, or are we?
I think we need a motion on
I
that.
make a motion that Mitch be the representative.
Intended representative.
Well, he's going to represent Rutland.
Potential
Doesn't
representative.
mean Rutland's going to be the
I'll second it.
nominee.
All right, so we have a motion for Mr. Nichols and a second by Clark. Do we have any discussion? Mike, can I vote on this, or do I have to recuse? I can vote. Okay. We'll have a roll call vote, seeing no discussion. Clark,
Aye.
Nichols,
Aye.
Wyman,
Aye.
and Stillings.
Aye.
And Rossetti, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, I guess. And
Good luck.
I look forward to that. No, it is. Look. I obviously, like everybody else in town, I have a vested interest in public education, and it's an interesting year for it for sure. So, the next item on our new business is the selection of a select board member to serve on the task force for exploring moving regional dispatch to a district model. I know this is an item that Nick has some familiarity with. I also know who on our board might take an interest in this. But Nick, did you want to maybe comment a little bit on the background?
Sure. This we started talking about district model regional dispatch from the very beginning, and the majority of the towns involved were interested in the district model, including Rutland at the time. I think there were 2 other towns that were not interested for whatever reason, and a lot of that interest comes from the town has more of a seat at the table as far as the regional dispatch district goes than they do currently, because right now it's our table, and every decision that gets made just is Rutland's decision, and a lot of the other towns would like a little more input in the process. And on the other hand, it also takes a little bit of burden off the town of Rutland to put into the district model. But anyways, this came from Hubbardston. The Hubbardston town administrator was looking to just re-explore it. So we're looking to set up a task force of one board member from each town and a town administrator from each town.
Okay.
Just to look into the options.
Who is the town? Obviously, it's going to be each town. So you're saying each town administrator is going to participate,
right,
as part of that task? Okay, great. Mike, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just as a way of background, like Nick said, this is something that's nothing even close to new. It was one of the first things that I was told about when I was hired as the town administrator here 2 years ago. The when this was, like Nick said, when this was originally brought up, Ocam and Barry had some reservations about it. What difference this would make if it's our department versus a district is right now, again, like Nick said, anything that goes on in that dispatch center is solely up to the town of Rutland. Any financial decisions, any negotiations, any service upgrades, questions, things like that, those are all town of Rutland questions there. What this does is it creates a statutory three-tiered oversight system in that there would be a finance board, a administrative board, and a public safety board. Under the statute, how that's set up is the public safety board would be set up with all fire and police chiefs within the district. The finance would be set up of a representative of every town's finance committee, so one representative per finance. And then the administrative side would either be a town administrator from that member town or a representative of the select board of that member town. The finance would set the budget. Public safety would make sure that all requirements are done there, and the administrative group would be the top tier oversight, just to make sure that every town has a say in the negotiations and general oversight of that district that's there. That is beneficial to the town because right now, say there's any issues financially with the dispatch department, which again they are not, but should there be in that hypothetical situation, that would be a Rutland financial hit alone, even if the financial error comes as a result of something that was done in Hubbardston or something that was done in Barry. Every town caused that financial issue, if it's a project in Barry, a project in Hubbardston, a project in Ocam. This is something that we received requests from before from Warren, who was interested in setting up a meeting with all of the select boards, and Hubbardston kind of took it a step further, asking for a task force with a specific final product in the end. So that's the background from my role as town administrator.
No, thank you for that. Are there any questions?
I have a question, if
Yep.
I may. I don't know who could answer this, but I think before in the past when I've talked with Mike Moriarty, he's been on board with the districting also. Does he have any involvement or consulting kind of on this task force, or would he be removed just given his kind of proximity to the dispatch?
I believe he does have an advising role. Mike, I think you...
Yeah, this is kind of Mike's baby. If he could see this get off the ground, I think he'd jump at it as quickly as he can. He'd be an advisor role for sure.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So, am I allowed to make a nomination as the chair? I'd want to nominate Mr. Stillings if he's interested, because I know it's something
I'll
he's...
second it.
We got a motion and a second, but only if Mr. Stillings is interested.
Oh, I'd be honored. Thank you.
All right. Well, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Clark?
Nick, can you just clarify who made the motion in the second?
The motion was made by me, and the second was made by Selectman Clark.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Whitman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
And Rossetti? Aye. Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll be well represented.
Thanks, Jeff.
So moving on, under new business, we've signed the September 1st, 2020 state primary election warrant.
Mr. Chairman, just as a clarification, because we did have another primary earlier this year, there is some confusion on this. The primary that we had in March was Super Tuesday. That's just the presidential primary. This is all statewide offices, so state representative, state senate, register of probate, governor's council, so on from there. So that is that state election. There is legislation that was passed with regard to the pandemic and mail-in and so on from there. Anita has all that information in her office, can answer all those questions. You can also find that information on the town's website. This is just to sign the election warrant so that we can have the September 1st election.
Okay, great. So we're looking for a motion to sign.
Motion to sign, move. We
We have a first a motion from Mr. Clark to sign the election warrant.
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Nichols. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Mr. Nichols?
Aye.
Ms. Whiteman?
Aye.
And Mr. Stillings.
Aye.
City, aye. Motion carries unanimous. The last item on our new business is something I had placed regarding a detailed town audit. As you are aware, we do have an annual town audit. However, it is topical in nature, and we don't do a deep dive or a forensic. What's commonly best practice in a lot of the municipalities statewide is when we have either a high turnover rate of department heads, or in this case, a chief executive official like Mike's position, having turned over several times now in the last couple of years because of Mike's wild popularity in terms of his political career. We've had a lot of turnover, and I think that in talking with Mike, that perhaps it would serve the town to have a forensic audit, including all of our departments. We do have kind of an unknown situation going into the fall in terms of revenue. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly taken a toll. It would just put us in a better financial footing and an understanding if we had a clearer picture of what we were looking at in terms of inefficiencies or other things of that nature. I did ask Mr. Nicholson to look into whether or not this would be eligible under the CARES Act funding allocation, which he believes that it is. And go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say that's something that we put in the initial request for. It appears on surface that it would fall under exactly what you said, just because of the financial uncertainty that we currently have with the pandemic. Where once we get final clarification on that, I'll let you know for sure, but it appears that it fits that description there. One of the other things I wanted to also throw out is that prior to my leaving, I submitted a request to the Department of Revenue for the services that they provide free to municipalities to do revenue forecasting. So I received contact from the Department of Revenue on that today, saying that that is just about done. They're just looking for some final documents there. And I received that request on the way here, so I'll send those over to Nick and Dan, and we can see if we can get that finalized there too. So the audit will really help give the next town administrator a really good understanding of the expenses and any inefficiencies, as you said, and then the document from the state will help with our revenue projections.
Absolutely. And you know, to reiterate too, this is really going to we want to put whoever we end up bringing in as the next TA in a good position to succeed. I know we've had some department head turnover over the last year and a half, 2 years as well. In my mind, this would just put the town in the best position possible to make informed decisions as we move forward through what is really been an interesting year. So I guess I'm looking for the board's support to move forward, and once we get clarification on how that's going to be expensed, we could move forward from there.
Do we have an estimate?
We usually, in my experience, having not worked with some of these, but on the periphery of some other municipalities, you're probably looking in the range of 40 to 50, which, if you recall, is just a little bit more than we spent for a rate study. So I think in terms of your cost benefit for the town, if this saves the town a couple of $100,000 in inefficiencies, it's well worth the funding, particularly if we can get this through the CARES Act because of the uncertainty we're looking at in the fall.
So do you want a motion to do this? Or you just looking?
I guess I'm looking for a motion, but I also entertain conversation if any of the board members had any questions about the idea behind it.
I had a question. It's Leah. I couldn't hear what I think it was Lyndon said. Was he asking about the cost if it wasn't funded somehow? Was that what was the 40 to 50,000?
Yep.
Okay, that was my question also. I thought that's what it's hard for me to hear Lyndon and Skip all the time. So
apologies.
No worries. Thank you.
We're in a hybrid format. It's kind of, you know, I'm flying blind here too. I can't see anybody on the screen. It's just kind of, there's a voice coming through the wall for some folks, and it's been entertaining. So,
yeah, kind of creepy.
but yes, that was Lyndon's question. Yep. All right. Do we have any more questions, conversation? If not,
I think it's a good idea, especially if we can get the funding through CARES and utilize some of DOR services and everything also. I mean, I think it's a good idea regardless. I worry about coming up with the 40 to 50,000 right now, given the budget situation that we're in. But if we can somehow fund all or part of it, then that's even better for sure.
Absolutely. And I also know that there are Mike, we want to look to obviously into the bidding regulations. I'm not sure if this is an excluded activity under no, it's not. But there are several prominent firms that do this statewide. That this is really what their primary focus is. I know that several of the surrounding communities also use third party for similar type deep dives. So
Yeah, the annual required by statute audit is outside of the procurement regulations.
Right.
Since this is an additional detailed audit on top of that, that does fall into that category. So
Okay.
that's where the difference is.
okay, great. So I just didn't know if there's anybody on the state bid list or anything like that as part of this service, but there might be. So that could be a way that we could look at it. All right. So I guess then I would be looking for a motion of support.
Make a motion to move forward on a detailed town audit report.
Second.
All right. I have a motion made by Mr. Clark and a second by Mr. Nichols. Do we have any further discussion?
This is Leah, sorry. Question about the motion. Is this kind of free reign regardless of how funding comes, or moving forward, like pending full funding, and if there isn't funding options, then we're still in favor but need to have a more in-depth conversation about that funding?
I think I would view it that way, Leah. I mean, obviously, with Mike coming back with a report of the funding, I personally think it's a good idea regardless, because again, I think your benefit's going to vastly outweigh the cost. But at that point, I'm expecting Mike to come back, or Mike and Nick to come back with a couple of options for us, and then we could take another action there if that's necessary.
I'm on board with that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Wyman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
And Resity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Moving on, do we have any correspondence? Nick or Mike, anybody receive anything?
The only correspondence that I have received is just a formal notification that this coming annual meeting for the Massachusetts Municipal Association will be conducted completely virtual. But formal notification in the terms of a snail mailed item will come later time. But just so you're aware, that's the only thing that my office has received.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to other business, I know, Leah, you had mentioned we could approve those minutes. So if we want to go ahead, I'll entertain a motion to just approve those from June 27th. And then we can go into executive session simply to approve minutes from executive session. So we're nearing the end.
I'd like to make a motion to approve June 27th minutes of the open meeting and July 27th meeting minutes.
I think though, Skip, I don't think you can make the motion for the 27th. I'm not sure. The recount was what, July 9th? Was that?
Oh, that's right. Sorry about that.
So I think Lyndon can participate. Skip, I believe you have to recuse yourself for the June minutes.
Sorry, I lost my head.
So I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from June 27th and July 27th.
All right, so we have a motion to approve them as a slate by Mr. Nichols. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any conversation? Second by Mr. Stillings. Do we have any conversation?
My only conversation is I don't know if we want to separate them, because the 27th was the before and after annual meeting, which was with the kind of hybrid old board. And I think Jeff was missing from the post annual meeting. There's two sets from that. We had that pre-meeting and then the emergency.
Leah, we have, even with the slate as a slate, we have a quorum to approve them. So unless Jeff is offended by not being included, maybe he can recuse himself and we'll just move on.
That's fine.
No offense, recuse.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Well, did Jeff do the second? So there's late.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Jeff, you have to rescind your second of the motion. It would have to come from Leah.
Rescinded.
Second.
All right, thank you. We'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Recused.
Nichols?
Aye.
Wyman?
Aye.
Stillings?
I recuse on that one.
Okay, and Resity, aye. Motion carries 3 yeas and 2 recusals. All right, so we're going to, I will entertain a motion at this point to go into executive session. Keep in mind that the appropriate motion will be to go into executive session for the reason number 10, to discuss trade secrets or confidential, competitively sensitive or other proprietary information, ending or reopening only to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we have a so moved motion by Mr. Nichols. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Clark. Any conversation, discussion? Hearing none, I'll have a roll call vote. Clark?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Whitman?
Aye.
Stillings?
Aye.
Versity, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Public meeting is now closed, and we will re-adjourn in executive session.